This is another episode of UFO Garage Podcast.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Joe, and this is where we talk about UFOs, aliens, and all things weird.
All things weird, baby. Who do we got this week, Joe?
Yeah.
Tell the people who we have.
Who do we have? We have got a Miss Melinda Leslie with us today.
She's been a ufologist, abductee, experiencer for over 30 years. She's one of our good friends we met at UFO Congress this past year. We've been trying to get her on the podcast, and she's just like the most awesome person. I love her humor. We had such a great conversation with her. This is after the fact, by the way, you guys. I'm stoked, so stoked for you guys to hear the interview. I mean, it's a long one,
and there's also more to it.
Yeah.
And she's going to be on again.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was insane. So we're going to do something a little bit different again this time. And we're going to kind of skip the Facebook stuff and we're going to go right into this because it is pretty lengthy. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing.
Yep. Let's get into it.
All right. Hey, how's it going, Melinda? Welcome to the UFO Garage Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.
Yes. Hey, I'm excited to do this.
Oh, we're super excited to have you because, I mean, let me tell you, ever since we left the Congress, this has been like one of the podcasts we've been the most excited for because, I mean, we've had Lorian, we've had Jocelyn on, and now we finally get to have you. We have the three queens under our belt now. Yeah, so we're super excited to finally...
The three troublemakers, I think, is probably a little more accurate.
Yes, definitely.
I love that.
So, yeah, we're super stoked to have you on today. And, hey, are you going to be... you're going to be out in California, right? In February for Lorian?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I'm speaking for Lorian Fenton's the producer, but it's UFOCon. And for anyone interested to look up the information, it's UFOCon 2020. So UFOCON 2020.com. And you can look up all the speakers information. You know, there's the drop-down list with everything in there, and registration, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, it's the end of February. The exact dates are escaping me right now, but the end of February, and in the Bay Area, Southern California, or Northern California, as the case may be. But
we're so excited
in San Francisco.
Yeah,
not very far from the airport. It's very conveniently located. Where there's airport shuttles to the hotel that it's at.
Oh, right,
sweet.
Cool.
We've actually, so Lorian actually got us a booth to be there. So we're going to be setting up and doing a podcast there too. So
wonderful.
Wonderful. So I'm excited to hear you speak at that. So I'm excited to hear all these people speak.
I'm doing a totally different kind of subject for that.
Ooh.
Because Lorian asked me to. Now today I know there's a couple of significant topics we're going to cover.
Yes.
But for that, Lorian said, you know, in recent years for her conference and some other conferences, I had covered my Milabs research quite in depth. And I had covered my 40-year history of the working group research. And she said, you know what, you haven't ever, and I've spoken for her at other events and my own Milab experiences. And she goes, you know, what people have asked me repeatedly about is to hear more about your alien abduction experiences.
Right.
She said, can you go into your alien abduction story?
Ooh.
And, you know, I'm really... tell you the truth, I'm often uncomfortable talking about that. Most abductees are all.
Right. Yeah, and rightfully so.
Yeah, and I went, well, I have to do this in context of something. So I thought about it, and then I thought, well, I'm disclosing my own personal story.
Right.
And we can't have any kind of official disclosure, or we shouldn't expect an official disclosure of any kind unless we're able to disclose personally.
Right.
You know, it starts with the individual. And I'm like, okay. And I've always kind of said that and believed that. And I said, okay, you know, here's where the rubber meets the road. And I thought, you know, if I've been saying that, I got to speak, you know, truth to power and and speak my own story. So I'm doing it under the guise of, or under the kind of the pretext or overall umbrella idea of, hey, people got to, speak their own truth and their own stories first. And this is my responsibility in doing that, to share my story. And of course, whenever you do that as an abductee, you're helping other abductees know they're not alone, and, and understand their own experiences better. And you're encouraging other abductees to come forward. When you come forward and take that risk, it certainly encourages others. So I'm doing it to say, hey, not only is this my story, but here, I hope this A, helps you, and B, I hope it encourages a lot of other abductees to talk. And
wow, yeah.
And so anyway, so she asked me to, and she said, look, people have been asking me for it. And now, luckily for me, I am going to have to create a whole new in-depth PowerPoint. And I know you guys saw my other recent lectures that I did for UFO Denmark, and
they're awesome.
Extensive PowerPoints. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to create a whole new PowerPoint for this. But luckily, a couple years back, it's probably been 5 years ago now, because I work with Yvonne Smith. Mm-hmm. And her organization, CERO. Yvonne Smith is a well-known abduction therapist in the UFO field. And she has this support group called CERO, Close Encounter Resource Organization. And she had me included in a book she had done that I think came out in, I'm forgetting now, 2012, was it that old? Anyways, but no, that wasn't that old. It must be more like 2015, 16. Anyways, but it's her book about the mass abduction event that happened at the Hotel del Coronado in San Diego, California.
Yeah.
And it's called Coronado, and it has a subtitle to it, but I was one of the people involved in that experience, and I'm in that book.
Wow.
And then she had
it's a really famous one.
Like 15 different people, in there, and our individual stories of our part of that experience. And she kind of put them in order, both that told how the experience unfolded for everybody, like kind of, and then also from the simpler stories of people who maybe didn't remember that much or have that much involvement, to up to the people who had quite a bit of involvement in it, that kind of thing.
Right.
And then also the order in which they kind of helped explain the whole event, depending on which part of the event they were most involved in, or that they just recalled in their regressions or consciously, and it was a combination of the two. But in doing that, she said, I need information about your abduction background. She said, a lot of my cases, I have the notes and everything because I've worked with them. In my case, we had been friends for a very long time, but I had predominantly initially worked with other hypnotherapists, not with her. Although I was involved in CERO and active, but she said, Melinda, I just did regressions for you in more recent years. And she said, I know you worked with, for instance, the late Dr. Deborah Troncalli and others, long story short. And she said, can you compile like your abduction history, backgrounds, and notes? Well, I realized she just needed a little bit for the book, but I took it on as a project and went overboard and provided more than I needed to, and came up with a whole outline for my background and evidence and experiences. And mostly because I wanted her to know. We'd been friends for a long time. She knew a lot, but there were whole experiences and pieces of evidence and stuff, just, time hadn't allotted, in our friendship for me to share with her. And I'm like, now that I'm working with her in a therapeutic sense, and in context to my being included in this book, I want her to know the whole background.
Yeah, definitely.
So, and I had lots of notes. I had, like she said, notes from your journal, drawings you've done, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, be careful what you ask for, because there's a lot, Anyway, so, but what was cool is I didn't necessarily want to, I didn't give her everything. She wasn't going to read, tons of journal pages and, whatever. But I said, okay, I'll do like an outline, and I'll put the highlights in there and the best evidence pieces in there. And it ended up being like a, I don't know, 20-page document, and
Wow.
and I said, I know this is beyond what you need, but you can pick and choose what you want out of here as it applies. But I wanted you to know this now that we're working together, since you didn't have that history on me. Anyways, so now when Lorianne asked me, I'm like, oh no, I have to go back and think of everything and gather a bunch of notes. And then one day I'm stressing about, and a light bulb goes off, and I go, wait a second.
I've already done this.
I have the outline.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And so now what I got to do is pick and choose what, and then it drops off as of a couple years, ago. It was up to the date, to the minute. When I pulled it up, I realized there were like, I'd compiled it for her. It's got to be. Maybe it is.
Yeah.
8 years ago or something. But, in that 8 years, I'd had another 3 to maybe, 5 experiences, some of them significant, and some other stuff. And I'm like, oh man, I got to go back and include this stuff. Right. And, but I will, and I thought, well, at least those current things, it's easy to remember.
Yeah, definitely.
Two of those were things she regressed me on, and so I'm like, okay, what I need to do is just include that. And then take that outline and turn it into somehow a PowerPoint presentation I can do in an hour and a half. So that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, you got a lot of material to run through in an hour and a half.
The highlights are there, and I'm like, okay, for my story of it having, like I said, that over umbrella idea of disclosing my personal story, I thought, okay, how do I disclose my personal story and give a variety of just some of the highlights so people understand this is how I learned I was an abductee, this is how it developed, this is how it's changed over time. And I'm always in my presentations about evidence. So what are the best pieces of evidence that I have?
Right.
And hit like the mass abductions when I've been involved with other people, just like I said, the highlights. And but now I'm looking forward, because now it went from, oh my God, how do I create this from square one, to, yes, I still have to create a whole PowerPoint, but at least it's like, thank God I have those notes. So a lot of the work is already there, and it's just going through it and picking and choosing and then updating.
That's what I've always appreciated about your research, Leslie, Melinda, is because it's also factual and it's based on evidence. And I feel like people would really not only enjoy, but like benefit in so many different ways, hearing your personal abductee experience. I mean, the Milabs stuff is just kind of, and I'm really interested in that as well. And I'd love for you to go in on that if you'd like to today. I'm really excited about you to hear what you have to say about your experience and the
well. It's just now that you guys have seen the presentation, and I'm hoping before you post this, I don't know what other information you put with it, but if there's a way to put links to the
UFO Denmark stuff.
UFO Denmark presentations. Yeah, because
absolutely.
I thought about it a lot before this interview, and I thought, gosh, in like a 2-hour interview, there's no way to even scratch the surface on either topic. I mean, those are both 2-hour long presentations, or over 2 hours, including questions.
Right.
They're very long, and I'm like, and they're complete overviews, even they don't include everything, but I updated my presentations for doing that for them. So this is the most current, recent, up-to-date presentations of my research, and one is about the Milabs, the covert program of reverse engineering extraterrestrial abductees is what I call it, and then the other one is on the history of the minders, but basically it ends up being the fact that there's this 40-year history behind what is called the working group, but it's the group behind To the Stars, ATIP, OSAP, and NIDS, and the Aviary, and so It's a 40-year history of this group of people, and I do that whole presentation, and these aren't things where I just, I think I'll research this now. Both presentations are 30 years of research.
Oh, absolutely. And you can tell,
and one is my own, personal research into the Milabs, and which starts with my own experiences with that, and then grew into researching and helping other people, and having a lot of abductees with those experiences come to me, and then also the working with a research partner, Randy Kopang, on. Which wasn't something we set out to do. We just kind of fell into it because it started with my Milabs research, and in an event within that called Minders, which is besides having seeing military personnel during your alien abductions and being harassment and surveillance at the hands of covert human personnel and monitoring and being re-abducted by military personnel, so you can have an abduction with aliens and seeing military personnel present, or you can be abducted by the military, and in which case you may or may not also see aliens present. And then, like I said, harassment, surveillance, monitoring. But another huge part of that is what we call the Minder scenario, which is another abductee came up with that term, which is these covert individuals, people with intelligence and military and high-level backgrounds who befriend you, and I have that quite in depth, as you two both know, and I always have. Well, that part of it, in researching that and my involvement with that, started myself and my research partner Randy Kopang on this tangent, and it became equally important as the Milab research, that it was like, wait a second, there's a group of people and there's a history, and when we started researching it, NIDS didn't exist. So we're researching it right through the changes and developments, and
right.
And
so if Melinda, if you will, just for our listeners, it maybe gives us a little bit of background on how you got into the Milab research and your experience, just kind of like an overview, not a quick overview, but like just to establish some gravity to why it is important. Your research is important and how it's kind of built up over the last 30 years, coming from the Milab research that you've done, your experiences, and then now bringing you to the working group and the steering group.
Yeah. Well, see, it was as I was just saying, getting into the working group was an offshoot of the other, because was part of it, and then it led to a whole separate area, which, because of the current disclosure story, because of the To the Stars Academy and ATIP, and going back, it brought it to the forefront, where suddenly the research had like new meaning and significance, or greater meaning and significance. I mean, it always did, but suddenly I could plug it in relationship to this current story, and go, oh my God, it's part and parcel and goes with it.
Right.
And and then I know we can get into the Wilson documents, and there's just again, it's so hard. In any one question you ask me, including the one you just did, can take. I mean, I'm laughing because we could spend 2 hours on one of these questions.
Right.
I could spend 2 hours talking about one experience I had,
Sure.
So, and that's the problem when I'm going to speak for Lorianne in the end of February, is going, okay, for UFO Con, is going, okay, well, how do I give any concept or idea of my abduction background? And it's just going to be an extensive bullet list of stuff, because that's all that there will be time for. I mean, it's hard to get into even one abduction event, because I could talk about one abduction for an hour and a half without taking a breath. I mean, on the experiences that are more involved, that that I have evidence for, and that others might be involved in, I mean, recalling the whole event. And occasionally people want to sit down and interview me, whether it's like this on a podcast or radio show, or just in person, take me out to dinner or something. And they'll say, okay, tell us about just one of the experiences, but that can take a long time. So, so going back though, to answer your question about how did I become involved? It starts with figuring out that I'm an alien abductee, which happened in 1989. With this part I could spend 2 hours on, but try to give a quick version. When the Bob Lazar story broke, Bob didn't go public at first. He was working with a couple researchers initially, and there's a whole long story behind that, so I'm not here to give the Bob Lazar story. But it was the breaking of that, and his, involving Gene Huff, and then John Lear, and then George Knapp, and et cetera, it goes on and on. But John Lear was going on a radio program when Lazar first was taking them out to the backside of base, Area 51, to Highway 375 in Nevada, and to the Black Mailbox and Groom Road, the back entrance into the base. And so he was taking them out there and showing them the test flights from that vantage point. And John Lear started to go on a radio program at the time called Billy Goodman's The Happening, being broadcast out of Las Vegas, and talking about it. Well, a friend of mine, though, who was a friend of mine in Southern California, where I lived at the time, was into Native American studies and Native American elders and Native American prophecy. She worked in a law office. Another lady in the law office stumbled upon this program where they were having Native American elders on, and that was Billy Goodman's radio show. And she got my friend listening to it. Well, after, a couple of weeks of her listening to it, suddenly, all of a sudden, one night, they switched topics completely, and they have John Lear on. And John Lear's talking about this whole beginning of this unfolding of the story and how they had just gone out a couple nights before to see sightings,
Yeah. Wow.
According to what Lazar said was the test flights and everything else.
Right.
So, and my friend listened to it for a couple nights and called me and said, "You got to listen to this." She said, "I got to have someone to share this with." And I didn't have an interest in the subject. My only interest was from a more kind of spiritual take,
Uh-huh.
and ETs as higher beings and that kind of thing. And she said, "Please listen to this." We were really good friends, and she knew I had, that interest at least. So she said, "Listen to this. I got to have someone to talk to about this." Well, it was absolutely fascinating, of course. And she would call me afterwards and, et cetera. Well, all of a sudden, the producer of the show had such requests from people saying, "Where do we go to see this? If this is on Highway 375 on, BLM land, how can we get out there and see it?" And so they arranged for 2 buses to go out there, and they were going to meet at a casino parking lot in Vegas and drive the 2.5 hours basically out to Rachel, Nevada, and out to the Black Mailbox and do this on one of the nights that there's supposed to be the test flight and everything. And it was, which I think was a Friday, if I remember correctly. But anyway, so they did this, and we didn't sign up to get on the bus, but they said you can meet with us and follow us out there. But they said where they were going and the mile marker and all that. Well, we were too late getting started because I remember we talked about doing this on Tuesday. Next thing I know, that Friday we're driving out there. But
road trip.
Yeah.
Well, and Bob said Wednesday is the day that you need to go anyways, right? So you got to go Wednesday.
So we go out there and we drove from Southern California, from where my friend lived in Lake Forest, California, and we drive 5 hours to Vegas, and we were like 2 hours behind when the bus was supposed to be there. And so we drive the whole way. They told us where, following maps closely at the time, And anyway, so we get out there. We have amazing sightings. We got out there, the buses were leaving. I mean, I could go into the whole story, but basically we had amazing sightings. And it was so mind-blowing. We took the trip on, again, by ourselves with another friend of ours.
So you did see some things in the sky that night.
Oh yeah. We had amazing sightings. It was mind-blowing. And so we went 2 weeks later, made the whole trip again, and then about a month after that. So this was September and October of '89, and we had maybe the first trip might have been the last weekend of August. I'm not sure. But anyways, basically September, October, 8, 9. And we had 3 back-to-back trips. Each trip out there, sat out, watching the sky all night, and multiple nights in a row, at least 2 nights. And some of those trips were 3 or 4 nights, Anyway, so each time we had just mind-blowing sightings. And something about having that was like inserting a key and turning it in my mind.
Interesting.
Because I started to have memories come forward of childhood, teenage, and young adult abduction experiences.
Wow.
And I want everyone to understand, who might be listening to this, how that happened was having so many sightings out there and seeing, first off, I was seeing absolute unknown craft defy physics and I had a pretty good basic understanding, so I knew what I was watching was defying physics the way it was flying. I knew there was absolutely nothing conventional about the flight characteristics or anything. I mean, it was like shooting off, stopping at a dime, shooting off, stopping at a dime, hovering and while we were there, the sheriff was there with us, the local other, sheriffs and county police, the white Bronco security trucks, with the camo dudes, from Area 51 were coming out and going past us. There were black helicopters in the air going up and down the ridge while this was going on, flying low over us, so they knew we were there. They were like, back then it was probably like rut-row, and yet we were on public land, so we weren't breaking any laws. And the sheriff was there to say, okay, don't anyone go any closer, and, et cetera, you're okay here,
Right.
So, and this was going on. So I knew it absolutely existed. Now, I'd had a sighting. I believe I had a sighting as a child that's a little more questionable. But then in 1987, now I didn't move to Sedona till 9 years ago, but in 87, there was this big famous event called the Harmonic Convergence. And I came out here and I used to come out to Sedona periodically. So I came with friends for that big event. And there were a lot of different things going on in the town of Sedona. I was living still in Southern California, and but Sedona, Arizona, where I live now, we visited. And so here in 87, there was this event at someone's house. Someone channeled information from higher ETs that if we went outside, and there were like 40 or 50 people at this event in someone's house.
The convergence.
And we all pile out into the driveway after someone channeled, said, if you go outside, we're going to do a flyover. We'll show our craft. And we're like, okay. So we pour out in the driveway. We're standing out in the driveway for only about 10 minutes. And these 3 big amber, orange, almost verging on red, amber colored lights, separate from each other, not one object, 3 separate things flying in a triangle formation, come in fast, slow down, hover over us, slowly drift off for a while, and then shoot off.
Wow.
And these 40 or 50 people in the driveway all saw this. And so in 87, I knew, I was part of that. We all witnessed it very clear. I'd absolutely had a UFO sighting. And then it made me rethink the time when I was a child and said, I probably had one when I was a kid, but this time I'm with all these other people. There's no denying it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then that had been the last sighting. That was in 87 until these things in 89.
Right.
But my friend was there. So that was another reason why she called me when that radio show was on.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. Yeah.
She was part of that same event. And she goes, look, we'd had a sighting before. It's real. And let's, so this was very interesting. Anyway, so we went out there again, had all these sightings. And like I said, it was inserting a key and turning it because I started to have memories come forward of abductions throughout my life.
Wow.
Two very quick examples. One of those memories now started to come forward in the form of dreams at night. But for instance, I had an experience as a young child of about 5 years old. My grandmother had a place in Yucca Valley, California, out in the middle of the desert, what we now know as Landers area, which is famous for the Integratron and Giant Rock and those things, for those that are familiar with it. Yeah. So And my grandmother lived out there. And then when I was about 5, we were out visiting her. And I was put down for a nap. Very common at that age, obviously. And the older kids, and I think maybe my cousins were out there too. Everyone went off to the movies. I was put down for a nap. Now, what I always recalled was that one adult stayed behind to babysit me, that they were out in the living room on a couch and were reading. And what I always remembered is little kids came to the bedroom window, wanted me to go out and play with them, and the adult had fallen asleep, and I sneak out past the adult and go outside and play with these kids. I'd always had that memory. I thought that was a legitimate thing.
Wow.
Everybody came home after the movies and said, "Did you have a nice nap, Melinda?" And I said, "I went out and played with kids." Well, my grandmother lived at the time in the middle of nowhere. Her closest neighbor was 50 yards away, an old guy that had 2 donkeys in his yard.
Oh, no.
Oh, sweet.
One, this was the 60s. One of the donkeys was named Kennedy. The other was probably Eisenhower.
That's awesome.
But that was the name of the donkeys. No joke. That's an absolute fact.
Well, they were Democrats.
And they just said it was donkeys. So, that's what they were called, And and we'd go over and feed Kennedy apples and carrots and stuff, And so the next closest neighbor was like, 2 miles away. They were really in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And
so
when
you
I
playing
said little
with
kids came to the bedroom, they said, "Melinda, it's like summer. It's 102 out, and there's no little kids out. Grandma lives in the middle of nowhere."
There's no way. Yeah.
And they said, "You dreamt it." And they turned to the adult who was supposed to be babysitting me and say, what happened? And they were like, "No, she was asleep." So they said, you dreamt it. You never left the house. You dreamt it. And I was like adamant. And then, you grow up, you forget about it. Well, then I'm having this dream at night, like 2 weeks after that first sighting. Or between the first one, because we went back out there 2 weeks later. So somewhere in there, I have a dream at night. And it was after the belief system shift of having seen sightings. I was seeing them defy physics, and they were flying in and out of the military base, and there was the helicopters and vehicles going by. So we know
something triggered in your mind.
So it's like it was a huge belief system paradigm shift.
Interesting.
And I think that huge paradigm shift of, they exist, they defy physics, the government knows about it, they're flying in out of a known military base. I mean, it's just, there's a cover up, all these things. It was became all of a sudden my new reality, And so here, so all of a sudden I have a dream at night recalling that whole event when I'm 5, but it wasn't little kids at the bedroom window. It was gray aliens. And yes, the adult had either fallen asleep or knocked out by the ETs, and that I was taken out by the grays.
Whoa.
And I actually received a little scar on my leg in that experience that I have to this day.
Huh.
Wow.
So did it feel like you were actually playing with them? Like,
it was a standard kind of abduction medical stuff, and they took a scoop mark on my leg that I had a little scar from.
Right. So that memory, is that like an implant?
But I remember that they treated me really good,
Right.
I had this memory of them giving me something, like giving me candy in it, like giving me something sweet to eat in the experience. And it was like, so it was like being given candy,
Wow.
is what I remembered, And then jumping ahead, I had another dream another night after one of the other, trips out there. And where I was 12 years old and staying at a little hotel again in Yucca Valley. I wasn't feeling well. The whole family was going on again, hot day. They're going on a day picnic and little hike to Joshua Tree National Monument. And I wasn't feeling good. So I said, "You guys, I'm sick to my stomach. I can't do this." So I was 12. I was old enough to be left alone at the hotel or motel, and I couldn't sleep in the room, really noisy, wall-mounted air conditioning unit making a lot of noise. There was no such thing as non-smoking rooms back then, and the people who had this room right before us must have been heavy smokers. It was really gross. So I said, "You know what? I laid down, couldn't sleep at all, went outside, took a little walk, came back, I was 12. I had a good sense of time. I figured it'd been an hour, Went outside, walked around, absolutely less than 2 hours. I would have thought about an hour. Okay.
Yeah.
I go outside, walk around, I come back, and everybody comes home.
Wow.
I went and used the bathroom, and I think when I'm in the bathroom, they come home. Come out of the bathroom, I go, oh, was it too hot? You guys decide not to do your picnic? And they go, Melinda, what are you talking about? We've been gone all day.
Wow.
We've been gone like
Whoa.
5 or 6 hours.
Dang.
We did our picnic. We went, we hiked around, we did our picnic, we hiked some more, whatever. It's been like 5 hours or something. And I'm like, no, you guys came right back. And they're like, Melinda, we've been gone all day. What are you talking about? So suddenly, and I always had that memory my whole life, and didn't think I'd fallen asleep. But, when you're 12 and your family's like, you fell asleep, older siblings are like, you fell asleep, idiot,
Yeah, definitely.
And so suddenly I'm having a dream at night recalling that whole thing. But when I went outside to get fresh air, I walked out into the desert, walked into a ravine. There was a landed craft, and I went on it.
Oh,
wow.
Whoa.
And it was landed there, and the grays were around it, and there was a big shadow, and everything about it. I mean, in detail. And I had an experience and received another tiny little mark on my leg from that event. And so here I am recalling this. So all of a sudden I'm like, what the hell's going on? And not because I could spend all day just on this stuff, but I'll save it for the lecture.
Sure, yeah.
Because what you just heard will be the beginning of the lecture.
Awesome.
And but then just jumping ahead, then I started to have current time experiences. Here's a real quick one. A roommate of mine, so this would have been like early 90. I had 2 roommates, Scott and Gail. Those are their real names. Scott was out of town on business. Gail was there. We had a 2-story townhouse in Tustin, California. One night we have an in-depth discussion. I'm an office manager at the time. I had to get up the next morning, go to work. We had this not an argument at all, but just a kind of an emotional discussion. And before going to bed, and I had a project due at work the next day, and so I thought, okay, I got to get to bed right away. We spoke later than I should have. I go to bed at like 11 or midnight, and I knew I had to. My alarm was going to go off at 6:30 in the morning. I had to leave the house by like 7 or shortly thereafter. So it was going to be, rush, get to work. Okay. And so we have this discussion. I'm like, oh my God, it's so late. I got to get to bed. If I fall asleep right now, I'll get 6.5 hours of sleep.
Perfect.
And I sat on my bed. Yeah. And that's, especially back then.
You don't need a lot of sleep when you're young.
Doable, yeah. So not great for a project due, but okay, I'm like, I need to get to bed right away. Okay. So I sat on my bed, did a quick little meditation visualization exercise to calm myself down so I'd fall asleep right away. I had my light on next to me, sitting there, just my legs under the covers. I'd already set my alarm because I didn't want to forget to set the alarm. And I'm still one of those people. If I got to set an alarm, I'll check it 3 times.
I'm that way too.
Yeah. I guess a couple times in my life maybe it didn't go off or, okay. So I reached to turn out the light and double checked the alarm. And it was 2.5 hours later.
What?
Oh, wow.
And there's no way I was sitting on my bed for 2.5 hours. I would have said 2.5 minutes.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God. And I said, what has happened in 2.5 hours? There's no way you were sitting here. And I couldn't get this image out of my head of 3 gray aliens standing next to the bed. And the one in the middle was holding like a device. And there were 3 of them. And I'm just like, this is crazy.
Wow.
So eventually I calm myself down, get under the covers, turn out the light, fall asleep right away. Thank God. My alarm goes off, waking the dead, 4 hours of sleep or less, right?
Yeah.
3, and I crawl into work. I get through the day. I come home. I'm making myself dinner in the kitchen. And Gail goes, what happened to you last night?
Oh, no.
What do you mean?
What does that mean?
Well, here she goes. She said she couldn't sleep after our discussion. So she sat up in bed reading because that's, she would read to go sleep. And she kept hearing noises downstairs. Now she knew Scott was out of town and I clearly had said, I got to get to bed right away. So she goes, and we had a 2-story townhouse. So she keeps going downstairs to check and nothing going on. She comes back up. She sees my light on under my door. We had like Berber carpeting, but this was an old like apartment and, old townhouse. So someone, and we were just renting. So someone had plush, because there was like a 2-inch gap under the door.
Yeah.
And so she knocks on my door, no response. Knocks on my door, no response. Pounds on my door, no response.
Wow.
Now she's afraid something happened to me. So she goes in my room. I'm not there.
No.
She goes in my room while I'm gone.
What?
Witnesses I'm gone during my missing time.
What?
Then goes and sits in her room reading, hoping she's going to... Oh, by the way, then she went downstairs, went outside. We had a carport. My car's in the carport, so I hadn't driven anywhere. She walks around outside. I'm not there. I'm nowhere in the townhouse. It's like 3 a.m. And she's like, where's Melinda at 3 a.m.? When she had to get up early and her car's here. What? She went for a walk in the middle of the night? What the hell's going on? So she goes and sits in bed, leaves her door to the hallway open, her bedroom door open, hoping our doors are right at the top of the stairs and the front door is at the bottom of the stairs and the entryway, And so she's hoping she's going to hear me come in the front door downstairs or hear me downstairs at any minute or something. And she's just reading, waiting for me to come home. And she said, all of a sudden there's a flash of light in the hallway, and she looks expecting that I'd come upstairs and like flick the switch really fast or something, flick the light switch really fast or knocked it with my elbow. And she looks expecting to see me, and emerging from this light, stepping into the entrance to her room, into her doorway, is a gray. And she's fully conscious, sitting up in bed reading. And she said, looked right at her. She'd closed the door to my room, after going in it, right? She went out and, didn't want me to necessarily think she'd gone in there without permission or, so she closed the door. She said, Melinda walked right through your door like a knife through butter, as if there wasn't a door there, just, knife through butter through your door. And she was fully conscious. So she witnessed my being gone and saw the alien in the hallway.
Holy cow.
Can I ask you a question just really quick? Did she mention any details about this gray being like emitting light of any kind from its body? Like was it glowing in any sort of way? I'm only asking.
She said it was years. I at that time, and then I ran into her again years later, where I asked her a lot more about it. And she said it was as physical as somebody standing there. She said it looked in every way like the typical gray, just it had an extra large head and really big wraparound eyes. But some of them are, look that way, like the really big head with the pointy chin and the really big wraparound eyes. It was that form of, very classic.
Did she say it was
gray?
a shorter gray? Because some of them are.
She said it came up just past the handle on the door. So we're thinking,
whoa,
under 4 foot. Like door handle's about 3.5 feet. So this was, 3.5 to 4 feet right in there.
Wow.
And she said it was really tiny. It had a very tiny body and stuff, but this oversized head and she ended up painting a picture of it, and it was really freaky. And unfortunately, I've never gotten a picture of that from her, and I've lost contact with her now. But I kicked myself,
well, I feel like I can see it in my head, just the way you're describing it, and effortlessly, in passing, describing this being. I mean, from your memory, I'm painting a picture in my head. I mean, that to me is just.
Now, eventually, I had Dr. Deborah Troncalli regress me over that one and stuff. But moving ahead, then I had an experience where I was driving with 2 friends on a mountain road in July of 90. So I was having a lot of experiences right then. And jumping ahead, because let's get into Milabs stuff, because that was a lot of background. But then in 93, and from that point in, late 89, early 90 till 93, I was having a lot of alien abduction. And I started to have harassment and surveillance stuff. So I can say that the Milabs stuff really kicked off with 2 back-to-back experiences in August and November of 93, as far as abducted at the hands of the military. Wow. But prior to that, I had increasingly on and off what you would call like black helicopter harassment and monitoring, feeling like I was followed driving somewhere, that kind of stuff was happening.
Yeah, sure.
And but I didn't have any context, although somewhere in about that time or just prior to that, a few of the famous abductee cases were starting to include this kind of stuff, you know. And so I was starting to read other people's stuff in the early 90s and learned, okay, you know, other people are having this kind of thing. This is common for other abductees.
I'm
so I
curious.
started to realize that. And then all of a sudden, August of 93, I had an abduction at the hands of military where, and because the August, November one, sometimes I flip-flop them a little and confuse them. Okay, so I'm trying to, so yes, the first one was, I'm taken from my bed where I live, from my room, and I am taken to an underground base, and I have a medical procedure done, and that I now know is gynecological in nature. And actually, well, now I can go ahead and say this because I know this now, that now at the time, I to this day, I don't have any children in this life,
Right.
Other than the hybrids I've been shown on ship, which is another story. But anyways,
Wow. Yeah.
so, which is, you know, very typical for all abductees. It's a very common thing that happens.
Right.
The taking of eggs or ovum from women and sperm from men, and they produce these hybrid beings, and you get shown everything from hybrid, you know, babies and newborns to toddlers, children, teenagers, and adults, you know. So, but what had happened is I had a procedure, and to the best of my knowledge was not pregnant, but I had a gynecological procedure that would be a very, very, very early term abortion. So
Wow.
I believe, based upon all that and everything going on with it, that I had probably a hybrid pregnancy. That the type of procedure I had done, I have every reason to think, was something that happens when there's a problem with the pregnancy.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Not so much like it didn't take,
Yeah.
and I was probably going to miscarry, and very early on. But I had this procedure done because I ended up eventually meeting medical personnel in my life who I shared it with, and they told me what kind of procedure, and et cetera. So based upon their feedback, I have good reason to think this is what had happened.
Right.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, have this medical procedure with them. It was in what I would call a tented hazmat kind of clean room environment, in an underground installation, but it was this tented, sterilized room environment where this happened. And there was lots more. I saw more of the base, and it was a whole bunch of stuff. And in the end of the experience, I'm handed over while in the base to ETs who cleaned me up in the final parts and brought me back. So I was returned
Wow.
by ETs. This is not uncommon in these experiences.
Okay.
Huh.
Okay, then jumping ahead. So that was August. And then,
Can I ask you a question really quick?
yeah.
So, so your experience, your medical procedure, this happened after the black helicopter experiences, and
Yeah, I just had a little bit of that stuff going on, but I did. And that stuff kind of,
so somebody knew
was
that
increasing.
something was happening, and then you were abducted by what in your memory and your experience.
well, it turns out it had happened. Well, I'll share something that I now know it had happened previous to that, but I'm just saying this was the beginning of my figuring this out,
Right.
Well, okay. Years went by and I'd lost contact with my roommate, Gail. And I ran into her. We're both living in Southern California, and I was in a bookstore in Costa Mesa, California, and I ran into her. And it turned out at the time I was living in had moved from where we had lived in Tustin, and lived a couple different places, but was at the time was currently living in Corona del Mar, and so was she. And it turns out she's just like a block away from me, renting a little studio just like I was in Corona del Mar.
Cool.
So once we learned that, we decided to get together, and I went over to her place, and that's when she showed me the picture that she had painted of the gray that she had seen that night. And she had painted that picture a couple of years later from memory, but she said, I haven't been able to stop thinking about what I witnessed with you.
Oh, yeah.
But it turned out for a while, back when we were living in Tustin, she had a 14-year-old daughter that came to live with us for a little while. And at the time I was told the daughter's not getting, the mom, Gail, and her husband were separated for quite a while and going to get a divorce. And what I was told was that the daughter didn't get along with the dad, and so the daughter came to live with us briefly, and maybe her and her mom were going to find another place, but, can she come live here for as long as that takes? Okay. And Scott and I said, fine. We understood the nature of the situation and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, then, so that happened in probably 91, let's say. And I was roommates with Gail for about 2 years. And her daughter, whose name was Angie, came and lived with us for about 3 months. We thought it was going to be longer. It was supposed to be, until something could be resolved. But after about 3 months, she left, and I was told at the time, or we were told at the time, she really missed her dad. And she really wanted to go back to her dad and her school friends, and that's why she left. Well, it turns out that I learned years later, no, Angie didn't go to live with the dad. She went to live with Gail's sister, her aunt, because she was so free. So when I ran into her years later, well, first off, she said this. She goes, are you still having experiences? I go, oh, yeah. She goes, you were becoming involved in research and stuff back then. Are you doing that? Oh, yeah, because this was years later. And I gave her an update. And I said, well, actually, I said, this might sound crazy, but I now research this other stuff because I learned not only was I having ET, I was having this other stuff.
Yeah.
And suddenly she goes, oh, my God, I'm so glad you know that now.
Wow.
Huh.
And I'm like,
okay, so why?
What? I go, yeah, exactly. I'm like, what do you mean I know that now?
Yeah.
What? And the tone in which she said it, and there was a long pause, and she kind of puts her hand over her mouth like, oops. And I go, what do you mean I know that now? And she said, back when Angie was living with us, I go, yeah. And she goes, you were having a lot of stuff happen. I go, yeah. And she goes, we were awoken in the middle of the night on more than one occasion by military men giving you what sounded like orders, because, we had thin walls and their bedrooms right next to mine. And she said it sounded like military men giving you orders and talking to you in your room, and you crying and pleading and saying, no, I don't want to go.
Whoa.
What?
And she said this happened more than once. And exactly like you guys just did. Whoa. I was like, what? What?
That is
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, what? How come you never told me this? She said, Melinda, you were so freaked out by your ET experiences back then. She said, I thought it would just, it'd put you over the edge. She said, you were already having a tough time with it. She goes, I didn't think you'd handle it.
Wow.
And I said, oh my God. And she said, why do you think Angie moved out? At that point, she says, why do you think Angie moved out? And I said, well, she missed her dad and her school friends.
Yeah.
And she said, no. She said, she moved out. She said, truth is, the reason she moved in is her dad was beating her.
Uh-huh.
And she said, Angie came to live with us because she was being abused by her dad.
Oh, man.
And I go, oh my God, you never even shared that. Well,
That's
she said,
terrible.
well, it was really personal. And Angie was only 14, didn't want anyone to know.
Right.
Yeah.
And she said, the truth is, that's why Angie, and she goes, no, she didn't go back with her dad. She went with my sister. But the reason she moved out after only 3 months is she was so completely freaked out by what was happening to you.
Oh, yeah. I can only imagine. I
Because
mean,
she was witnessing alien stuff, and she was witnessing alien stuff and military stuff.
Yeah. So I know what everybody's asking themselves right now, whoever's listening to this, is do you know what the connection is on having these military people and the ETs there at the same time? Do we know why they're working together? Like, is there like a pact between them of some sort, or?
Well, it's complicated, and the kind of answer to this is multi-layered.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah.
Okay, we'll start with. I think it's important for people. Now, I want everyone to understand, I've now done 30 years of research, into this subject, and or at least like 28 years, and so, and I've worked with just hundreds of people that have had it happen, and I gather people's evidence. I am not a therapist. I don't do therapy. It's counseling only in that, talking to someone is a form of therapy. But I don't claim to be a therapist. I don't do hypnosis. I'm just a researcher and investigator. But I investigate and research this. When I say I've worked with hundreds of abductees with these experiences, that means hundreds of abductees have shared their accounts with me. And if I kind of sat down and interviewed them, I call them one of my cases, and I probably have over 100 people that I would say are my research cases where I've interviewed them about their experiences. And then there's more that I know of that I just know of their experience, or they wrote about it in books or whatever, And then over all those years, I've worked with a lot of the major abduction researchers, well-known people like John Mack and Bud Hopkins and John Carpenter and Leo Sprinkle and the late Dr. Tupper Collier, I should say the late, Bud Hopkins and late John Mack, anyways, whatever. And et cetera, and on, more than that. And all the current ones like Barbara Lamb and Yvonne Smith and Kathleen Martin and et cetera. Okay. And Mary Rodwell and, so, and I've talked to these people about their own cases of this. So all the major abduction researchers had cases of this, and some of them had a lot of it, quite a bit of it. Some of them. It changed from researcher to researcher, like Leo Sprinkle and John Carpenter having a lot of cases of it, to Dr. Jacobs not having very much, but it depended on the person and the kind of abductees they were getting and whether those abductees felt comfortable to say something to them. But
right.
And so it started to become like, wow, this is something everyone in this field knows about, and it happens to a lot of people. And so over the years, it's just become this huge investigation process into all these cases and everything. And go back and tell me your question, because I want to try to narrow it down, be more succinct.
So the connection between the ETs and the military people being in the same room.
Well, so I started to say the first thing is realizing why the military guys are involved. So let's start with that. Okay. The military guys are involved, at least with the abductees, the contactees. What do you say, abductee, contactee experience, or whatever? Okay. I hate, none of the names work. So, whatever someone wants to call themselves,
exactly.
More power to you, Okay. And not to diminish it, it's all significant, but there's such a fine line between different things, and it's purely what the person views themselves as, which may not actually be the nature of their experience, whatever. Okay. So whatever you're comfortable calling yourself, but okay. So, what the military guys seem to be most interested in are, I used to say 4 categories. Now it's 5, and I'm doing this off the top of my head without having to go right to my notes. Although I might slide a bar down here on my
go for it.
PowerPoint in front of me just to have this see if I can find it quick. If I can't, I'm not going to take a lot of time.
Slide that bar down.
Slide that bar down.
The good thing about our show is no commercials, no breaks, no time limit.
Here we go. Trying to
do what you need to do.
See if I can find it quickly. Oh, shoot. I might be about to give up. Come on.
Man, I just
well, it's 5 categories, as I was saying.
Uh-huh.
And if I don't find it quickly, I'm going to give up. But I have it here, so I should find it quickly. Oh, come on, Melinda.
Because I don't know if it is like a
Okay, here we go.
Perfect.
Found it. Yay. Okay. ET motives and agenda. Like, okay, so the when I say Milabs, in case people don't know, that means MIL for military and AB for abduction. It means people who are alien abductees get targeted by covert human personnel. Now, I realize in recent years, some other people kind of took that term and started using it incorrectly. Okay,
Yes,
right.
to reference something that turned out not to be true.
Corey,
Long story short, yeah. You know, you guys know. Okay, so and kind of, for lack of better terminology, bastardized the terminology and used it incorrectly. Okay.
pronounced it wrong.
But in my research, it always referenced, and from an abductee who coined the term Milabs. So there's an abductee that created it, and then a famous author, actually a couple, Helmut and Marion Lammer, who wrote a book called Milabs, but borrowed the term because they liked it from the abductee who created it, and asked her, "Can we use that for the title of our book?" And she said, "By all means." By all means, have at it. So, and that abductee was Cat Wilson, who came up with the term. So
that was nice.
And she just said, "Gosh, she was having experiences with it," and she says it's like I'm being abducted by the military, like I'm a military abductee. And so she said, "Well, we need an acronym for simplicity because everything in ufology, including UFO, is an acronym.
It keeps the conversation going,
Yeah, exactly. So for simplicity, she said, I'll call MIL for military and AB for abduction. So that's where that came from. So, and as a way to talk about it and share it with other people. And so the term started to catch on. And like I said, then Helmut Lammer said, "Can I borrow it?" And there you go. Okay. So, so the 5 categories. I'm sorry, I get sidetracked easily, don't I?
So do we.
Yeah.
It's quite all right.
There's no such thing.
The subject is like,
It's a winding road.
it spreads out and it's like an onion and the parts touch each other, and so unpeeling it, it's not linear. It's not none of these subjects are linear.
Yeah, in order to explain one thing, you have to explain 5 other things before people even get what you're...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then, people say, "I can't follow what this person's saying." I hear that from people all the time when I do interviews. It's like, you guys, this isn't for beginners in the subject. You got to have an advanced degree in UFOs and abductions to follow, But and I can't always start at square one,
Right. Well, I think most of our listeners at this point, the people that have been following us for as long as we've been doing this podcast, and including our previous episode where we kind of gave an overview of some of these acronyms, I feel like most people are caught up. I mean, every now and then, if you feel like you need to go into why, but you're good. You're not losing us.
Well, and you guys can always explain that in case I don't know what that is.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect.
We'll stop you if we're
so
lost.
going back to answering the question you had given me, which is, okay, so let's start with Milabs being military, but it's not just military. And that's why I started to call my research the covert involvement, because it's covert humans. Let's emphasize that it's humans versus ETs. It's humans in an official capacity. They're obviously, covert military, yes, but also covert intelligence, covert technology development, etc. So, and it's like saying military industrial complex, or
Right.
So it's like, okay, but covert, when people go, "Oh, we get it, special ops," people know what special ops, black ops are.
Yeah, right. Call of Duty, Black Ops.
Yeah. So
Black Ops.
So it's black ops humans, okay, and involved in this. Okay, let's. So
for all we know,
what they want to know from the abductee is information that that they have reasons to want to know. And there could be a variety of reasons as to why they want to know these things. But here's the 5 categories. Category 1 is ET motives and agenda. They want to know from the abductee what we know about the motives of the ETs, their agenda, what are they doing, why are they doing it, that kind of stuff.
And by we you mean abductees.
Abductees,
yeah.
Yes. Okay, then the covert humans want to know from the abductees the ET and abductee genetics. So they want to know, first off, are we hybrids? And or is the abductee a hybrid? If not, have they been affected or tweaked genetically? What is it unique about our genetics? What is it the ETs are interested in our genetics? Okay, so kind of the whole genetic DNA component of it. Okay, 3 is the covert humans, military, want to know what are ET and abductee psi abilities. The paranormal functioning, the psi meaning PSI, like psychic,
Psychic, yeah.
But the paranormal functioning, how do the abductees do telepathy with the ETs? How do we do telekinesis and psychokinesis, moving and affecting matter with your mind?
Cool.
How do we do the telepathy? How do etc. And have we been trained, enhanced, or affected by the ETs or by our experiences in those ways? Do we have advanced sight abilities? So they're interested in whether you have that. Then category 4 is the development and practice of mind control procedures that the covert human guys use the abductee both to suppress the memory and to do what they're doing in these covert abductions and harassment and surveillance and everything. How do they repress that memory in the abductee? Is with a bunch of well-known mind control procedures, the use of fear, the use of drugs, hypnosis, fear, intimidation, and pain inducement. Those are all, well known in mind control research circles. And so it's the development and practice of those techniques on us. And, and I'm sure that that's its kind of own area of research. Now, that was something I added on later, many, many years, probably within the last 10 years for sure, in my research to say, okay, I always kind of steered clear of the mind control part. And I had to go, wait a second, it's such a huge part of it. I can't.
Yeah, definitely.
I can't.
It's got to be. Yeah.
It's how they're able to do it. How do they get away with this? Well, It's mind control procedures. That's how they get away with it. Okay. So, and then the 5th, which is probably the most significant. I mean, those are all significant. But I think what is their reasoning? How are they spending trillions of dollars on these projects, or at least billions, or whatever,
Yeah.
How are they, why are they risking
the McDonald's money, the billions?
Why are they risking tipping their hat on this and showing what they're doing and disclosure by their involvement? And this, you guys, it's not just a few abductees; it's a lot.
Yeah,
right.
It's huge. I can get into that in just a minute and kind of what the numbers show. But so this last category, is what I think is really the reasons for the expenditure and everything, which is technology. Okay. The mental interface or psi operation of ET technology and everything else about the technology. So as an abductee, have you flown or navigated a ship? Have you been shown the propulsion systems and controls? Have you been shown any of the ET technology? Have you, whatever, navigation, propulsion, how ships work, how the various pieces of technology on the ship work, how anything about weapons. Have you been shown ET math or formulas?
Ooh.
ET language or alphabet? Have you been shown anything about, again, it gets into the ET motives and agenda part, have you, not only have you been told that or shown that, but have you learned the sociology of the ETs, or, And the fact that technology, all ET technology, is psi or consciousness based.
Yeah.
So it's like
How they fly
intangible.
the ships is with their minds. I mean, it's more than that. There's a technology involved, but the navigation of the ship is mental.
And they probably don't like that because they can't reproduce something that is consciousness based. It's like so out of their grasp, right? It must be frustrating for them.
Yeah. And so when they now we're talking about the humans, the covert humans, when they have crash retrieved technology and they're reverse engineering it, or technology whether it's shot down, given to them, or crash retrieved, or all the above, whatever. And they have it from all the above. They've been given stuff, they've shot stuff down, and of course they've retrieved a lot of crashes. So when they are reverse engineering the ET technology, and whether they're applying it to conventional stuff, they're for simplicity, I'll say conventional stuff that's ours, or exotic stuff that's ours, or fully operating ET technology in our possession, they know that it's got this, like you just said, this conscious, this psi component, and that frustrates them because if they don't have that, so they're looking for individuals that have that, and the abductees have that. The abductees have the hands-on, the interaction, the telepathy, all this stuff as a byproduct of their experiences, or it could be why they were abductees in the first place. Now, we do know abductions run in families. Alien abductions run in families. But we also know that psychic and consciousness stuff runs in families. I mean, psi ability, psychics runs in families. There's like a genealogical DNA bloodline thing about it. Well, same with, abductions. It runs in families. So they're studying the ETs now, are studying the, genealogy, and the genetics, and producing hybrids. And these hybrids are extremely advanced in intelligence, extremely psychic and gifted in psi abilities. So the ones that abductees give birth to here on Earth and feel that their human children are actually hybrids, are off the charts in these areas. And they might have more than one kid, and the kids that aren't, and the kids that are off the charts, So, and so this is something, known in the research community. Well, again, like you were just, you got it. You really got it when you said that, when you said it must frustrate them. They don't have it. How do they do it, etc. Well, how do the abductees do it? So we become of interest to them because we have this component and maybe this genetic component to that. Hence, they're interested in our genetics. We have the genetic component to be able to do the technology. We have the psi abilities, and so and then it gets to, now you guys saw my presentation, and you probably remember that I have this chart that shows this curved line of how involvement with covert human involvement with the abductee can start.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then
we'll share that
up
too
in their life.
For anybody listening, we'll share that chart. Sorry.
Yeah. So do you have that?
We'll share the chart. We took a bunch of screenshots.
Okay, great. Wonderful.
Yeah.
No, that's great. So share that chart, and you'll see there's this developmental curve to having the types of experiences you can have with covert involvement.
Right.
And then at any point it can repeat. So it's actually more like a circle, but it doesn't circle for everybody. I mean, at any point it can stop, or you can go back, or, whatever. And but it ramps up.
It definitely answers a lot of questions too, because like one of the big things that I always wondered was like, okay, if these military guys are working with the ETs and they want to know all this stuff, why don't they just like look to their left and ask the ET?
Well, they probably want to know too.
Yeah.
Well, I can answer that twofold. One is I don't really know, and the other is because I've had to, in my 30 years of research, kind of come to terms with why that might be. I don't really know, but I'll tell you what my theories are.
I think it has to do with them not having that capability, like that the abductee is important for that specific reason. They don't have that capability, right?
You got it. And they're looking for people because some abductees then get recruited into these programs. And recruitment can be everything. For instance, you're an alien abductee and you just happen to be in the military or join the military. Well, you can get recruited out of the military into these military programs and sought out while in the military because they also knew you were an alien abductee. And so some people get recruited out of the military, and you get the variations on what's called super soldier, because these people can get recruited into these programs.
Well, they just so happen to be people that have had these experiences, and they just so happen to be in the military as well.
Yes.
And that's where the super soldier kind of...
Okay, that's one type. Another type is, let's say you're an alien abductee and you get recruited into these programs, but you never join the military. But next thing you know, now it can happen consciously, where you're approached and asked to participate. But it can also happen in an abduction scenario where next thing you know, you find yourself as an abductee participating in some of these programs.
Right. Which I think a certain somebody that we mentioned earlier might have, I think he had experience like that, and it just kind of snowballed into this other thing. It's like I don't know how you feel about that.
Maybe.
It's a possibility. I think something happened.
Well, and even any controversial case aside, I know of 100 solid cases that are evidence-based. And,
I was hoping you'd say that. Yeah, I was hoping you'd say that, because I know yes, that's just the simple way to do it, is to say, look, there are really good rock solid cases that you don't need the ones that aren't. Exactly.
And when I say ones that aren't, I mean when someone has zero evidence for anything they're saying, presenting,
right? And that's again, to our listeners right now, if you're just now jumping in, or if you skipped ahead, if you're talking about evidence, Melinda Leslie's got mounds of evidence.
Yeah,
we're not just saying that.
Hours
and hours and documents.
Thank
and
you.
documents.
I appreciate that. Well, I try to keep it very evidence-based, because to me, it's you can talk and it's just stories. It's just stories without the evidence.
Exactly.
And even here, Lorianne wants me to talk about my alien experiences at the conference. Okay, but to me, I still want to present the evidence, because without the evidence, it's just stories.
Well, your hindrance, I mean, your skepticism and even talking about it even validates the believability of, just your research. I don't want to even say your experience, because most of what you bring to the table in this community is based, like, research-based, evidence-based. So it even, like, further validates for me, personally.
Yeah, definitely.
That you're, like, kind of hesitant, like, okay, well, if you want me to,
experiences are my drive. They're what drove me to do this? How did I fall into this? How did I fall into this? I started having experiences of it. I started to ask deeper questions, like, what's going on? What's actually happening? Why me? Is it happening to anybody else?
Right.
And that led me to meet other cases. And I never said, oh, I'm going to research this. All of a sudden it was like, years into it, I turned back and then, someone else interviewed you. So, well, you're the foremost researcher on this. And I went, what? What does that mean? When enough other people start calling you that, you're like, okay, I'll own it.
I'll take it.
Yes, but you guys are now researchers. That's what happens. It's when you start doing the research, you're a researcher. There you go.
Definitely try. I tell you what, I've done more reading in the past maybe 6 months than I have done in like the past 6 years of my life.
Yeah,
and it just it never ends. I mean, once you reach to one thing, it opens a whole new chapter of just endless.
And there's
stuff.
just more questions. There's nothing. You never get resolution. It just gives you more questions.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like you said, you got, over 40 years of research and experience in this stuff. And it's like, man, like you can tell, because, we sit here and we go through this stuff and we read all these names, and then we look into these programs, and it's like, it would literally, like, even having all this information in front of us and like looking at it, it would literally take us probably another 3 years to just read the material. There's so much.
And so much of it was like, whether it's the Milabs stuff or the Minder stuff, is I was living it. It was like living it and personally knowing these guys, and so and knowing other people involved and abductees they were involved with. And so you start to have, I was living it and then also researching it too. So it was like I'm living it, I'm also digging for more. And part of that, I have to give so much credit to my friend, Randy Kopang, who I call my research partner, because through the years, he's just, this amazing researcher. And when it came to digging and connecting dots and finding stuff, he was so good, And now I also share some stuff with Grant Cameron, who's so good at it, and Richard Dolan, who's also so good at it, of course. Right. So, I always am quick to say I stand on the shoulders of giants, and many other abduction researchers and what am I saying? Cover up disclosure research, of other people in the field. It's definitely
it's a lot.
Other people and their work, and it becomes necessary to read all that stuff because you might have your little part and they have a part, and you have to start connecting the dots, and then we have to share that with each other. It has to be shared so we can all move forward together,
Right. And speaking of moving forward, Melinda, in your presentation, UFO Denmark, about the working group, about the steering group, you had mentioned that you were in a room with a few individuals that kind of spoke to that idea of this closed loop information system. I was wondering there's transcripts that you go through, but maybe on this podcast, if you could kind of go in a little bit more detail about what you guys talked about and the significance of that statement, like, hey, we control all the information that's leaked into the UFO community, and we could stop the train at any moment, right?
Yeah, I was told a lot of those kind of comments. Okay. Now, before I get into that, and I'll go there, but I realize I didn't really finish completely answering your question, because I said we got into what are the military or covert human guys interested in the abductees.
Oh, yeah.
Let's
finish that. Yeah.
But you were asking about their involvement with the ETs. Yeah. Well, they're involved, and I was just trying to give that as some background to say this is why they're with the abductees. Now, what's their involvement with the ETs? Well, there's so many different stories about how that may have first started, and that there's treaties, whatever. But there's different stories. I don't know which is factual and which isn't. There's just a lot of research and a lot of reading someone can do about that. And you go to the Holloman Air Force Base landing and the Edwards Air Force Base landing and meeting up with ETs, and the ETs meeting the president, and, whatever. Maybe some of those are true. But what I can say is in the experiences of the abductees, it's very common to see humans. And like I said, they can be military, they can be intelligence community, they can be technology community, whatever. But usually it's in the context of an underground base, usually. Sometimes it's above ground, but it's usually in a military or covert facility, okay? Mm-hmm. And sometimes though on ship. Okay, so that happens too. One experience that I had with two friends taken together is we had a predominantly fully ET experience, but in the background, there was a guy in military uniform, naval uniform in the background, like he was monitoring or watching what was going on, like he was there allowed to monitor. Yeah. He wasn't another abductee. He was there officially, it appeared, to monitor.
Wow.
So it's like, what the hell was that, But then I've had experiences that were mostly all human that just happened to have some ETs present. Now, my experience in, like I said, 93, ETs didn't show up till the very end. So it was a fully ET experience until the very end when I was handed over to ETs, and they did some follow-up medical stuff, I think, to help me heal very quickly from this. Yeah. Although I did have some healing stuff afterwards that I didn't seek out a medical doctor at the time, but years later, I questioned someone with a medical background, and they questioned me all about the event. And I was relaying what I went through in the healing process. And they said, you went through all the stuff you would normally go through in healing. You just did it really quick.
Wow.
They were like, you did what should have taken like 6 months. It took you like 6 weeks, or what it should have taken like 3 months took you like 6 weeks,
Yeah.
and or 4 weeks, took like a month to do what it should have taken 3 months.
Which is another reason why maybe the pharmaceutical, some shadow pharmaceutical company would be interested in that as well. I don't know. I'm just kind of
pumping their funds into it. Yeah,
exactly.
Sure. Well, these covert guys, and that healing part too, I think goes into the side component and the technology component. Like I said, it's all kind of one thing,
Right.
When I say those 5 categories, they all interlace with each other, Yeah. And anyway, so like we said, the practice and development of mind control, there's the practice and development of medical procedures, for sure. And now it's not like we're being experimented on medically, although maybe we are in some contexts, but certainly they're learning from their medical procedures with us, and they're learning from what medically happened to the abductees at the hands of the ETs, So maybe I should, there you go. I think I have to add that as a sixth category, practice and development of medical procedures.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I mean, that's definitely a big part of it.
And Lord knows they're probably perfecting their mind control drugs.
Yeah, definitely.
So part of it in there too.
Yeah, it's called Coca-Cola.
And people get mad when I laugh at this stuff. You guys, that's my letting off steam.
Yeah,
that's, when I laugh about it, I'd be crazy if I didn't laugh. You got to have a sense of humor.
Well, if you didn't laugh,
see the futile, because like you said earlier, it was so brilliant the way you put it. Like, it must frustrate the hell out of them. I think it does, and that's comical to me that they don't get it, and they're not going to get it, because the fact that they're a military and intelligence community mindset. That mindset alone is incapable of getting the consciousness and the side components of this, because it would mean giving up it would be
everything they are,
putting that on the shelf, know?
I don't know, but I find that so funny. I don't know what. They're just like, dang it.
It's like, we know everything except for the stuff we really need to know. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and we need you for that.
And some of them do, but that's why people get it. You think, okay, how do people get in these covert programs? Well, you're either in the intelligence community or you're in the military community, and you get trusted and you get brought in.
Right, runs in the family type deal
and
too.
It's kind of, you go back to when the remote viewing program happened. I don't know if you guys have studied it that much, but when that happened and they started doing the investigation of putting stuff together, SRI, Stanford Research Institute, and decided, well, we want to take this into we want to militarize this, beyond just studying what Ingo Swann does and reverse engineering his process, and okay, Ingo, how do you do this? And can we teach it to others? Well, then, it made sense to them at the time. Let's find people who have a natural ability at it. And so we're going to find people we can trust, maybe people in the intelligence community or military community who will keep a secret, If not, we can dangle enough things over their head to keep a secret.
I think that's a huge point you just made, actually. Yeah. Within the military community.
And when they started to say, well, if we're going to create a military unit to do this and train these guys, let's look for military individuals. Okay, they're in the military, maybe they're high ranking or something, or just enough degree where they can be trusted. And then we need guys who might have a natural psi ability. And so they found these guys that, maybe had a near death experience. Okay. Right. Maybe we're known to have astral projection experiences. Maybe we're having precognitive experiences, and these were the folks that they recruited to be that original team of guys, that's established and well written about in many books. And anyway, so it's the same thing with this. It's like, okay, they're recruiting people who have skills and abilities. and they know the abductees do. So the abductees become the perfect pool to go find people from. Okay. And if you're an abductee in the military already, well, you're easy pickings. First off, if you're on a military base, you know, you're like, you know, sit and duck, you know, but some people get recruited who were never in the military and yet get recruited into these programs. Some of them consciously, where they approach you and you get to do it by choice. And some of them in a mind controlled situation environment or an abduction environment, you know, so you can go, okay, well, you know, it doesn't require that you be in the military and intelligence community to be recruited. And yet if you're not of interest, or they don't think they're going to be able to trust you, like, you know, I don't think I ever went further in it than all the stuff that I did have happen, because I talk too much. They're like, scratch that one off.
There's your shield. That's your shield right there.
No, you know,
it protects you.
And if you're someone really pro disclosure and stuff, they're gonna be like, cross them off. They ain't gonna, you know, they're gonna go blah 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 with whatever they get. You know.
Yeah, I mean, talking about keeping a secret. I mean, that's, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, like,
and where that doesn't work, with someone can keep a secret, and they're like, well, we really like this person. We, you know, they got abilities or mad skills. You know, we want their mad skills. You know, then they're going to be like, okay, well, let's just do it through mind control, because then that also gives them plausible deniability.
Oh,
you know, because no, nothing happened to you. See, you know, it's just in your mind. You know. And I think so. I mean, I've just had to, over 30 years, I've had to just do my best to figure these things out. Now, going back to their involvement with the ETs, well, in crash retrievals, there were some living ETs, and that's probably the beginning of involvement with them. But then there's information. Hey, you go into the whole ancient alien stuff, and you go, well, wait, the elite of the world were involved with them going way back,
right?
You know. So if all that's true, then there's been a long involvement with them. And again, you get to, well, who can be involved with them and keep the secret? Well, the intelligence and military intelligence community can, you know. So they were the natural source. And who's going to retrieve the technology or shoot it down but those guys?
Yep.
And so the technology went into the hands of that community, and the information went into the hands of the community that can keep the secrets.
Huh.
So I think that's how it ended up, and that's how it ended up with them interacting with them.
That makes sense, yeah.
But they're also missing these other components, and like you said, probably the frustration is when it comes to the technology, you gotta have that part.
Yeah, I feel like just looking at. Let's take, I mean, I think maybe we all know at least one person or have met some person that is a very open person and kind of considers themselves spiritual. I mean, I think we all consider ourselves a little spiritual, but I think we at least all know at least one person that's kind of very open, like an open book, right?
Yeah.
That person, to me, is the most likely person that would be approached by an extraterrestrial civilization that runs their technology off of consciousness, because that person is more susceptible to these ways of thinking, right? But they're also the same person that will be very open and say, hey, you know, I know you're my best friend. I love you. I was also I'm working with the government right now. I can't lie to you.
Yeah.
You know, it's they're also
there are people that do. We do have whistleblowers and people that come forward and say that. And then we have the wannabes too. So it's difficult for a public having an interest in this, or the UFO community or the conspiracy community say, well, what's true, what isn't? It's like, well, go back to who's presenting evidence. You know, if they're not presenting evidence, say, go back, bring back some evidence, or leave us alone. You know, I think that's where you have to draw that line. But if they've got evidence for their experiences, and, you know, I mean, there's all sorts of different kinds of physical evidence and monitoring and surveillance evidence, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, you'd go, okay, if there's evidence, let's go forward and hear this person out. And if there's not, tell them to get their evidence and come back. And if they don't have it, then they become a case we don't spend our time on. You know, I think it's that easy.
Yeah, that's important. That's definitely important.
You know?
Uh-huh.
And but as far as, you know, the military guys and covert intelligence guys involved with the ETs are the point where it's that that level of the secret, that depth. And I think you've gone so deep before you're trusted with that level of information. You know, you're fully on board before you're ever see an ET, you know.
Right.
There's stories of some guys and engineers and even Lazar and Bill Uhouse and people in 51 S4, whatever, just as a quick example, who are there for a long time before, or even if you go back to the story of Dan Burrish and stuff, a lot of times you're in deep working with the technology before they ever let you even have a glimpse of an ET.
Right.
You know. And it's sometimes, you know, in the case of, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Bill Uhouse, but in his case, it's like seeing it through a door. Oh, no, that was Lazar, the seeing it through a door.
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. You said it looked
and
like
it's
a
like,
child
well, was
or
that
something?
to see how he would respond in his reaction? No, maybe he just happened to be wrong place, wrong time and caught it by accident. Maybe.
Right.
Or that was done deliberately to see how he'd respond.
Right.
And since maybe his response wasn't that good, they said, okay, well, we'll wait. Maybe do this again later.
That sounds like some really passive aggressive CIA type of test.
Yeah,
you know,
well, that's how they're going to do it, to see how you react and to see if you're cool with it and if they can slowly bring you into that. Like they're going to see, are you okay with it? You know,
right.
But here again, shortcut, abductee, we're already okay with it.
Yeah.
Shortcut.
These don't freak us out. I mean, they do, but we've learned how to cope.
Yeah.
We have the coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh look, this person can fly a ship, navigate it. They've been shown the technology.
Wow.
They have the mental ability. They have the psi ability. ETs don't freak them out so bad. So you know, we're the perfect. We have half the training is already there.
Yep. And I guess on the flip side of that too, like you couldn't be like too cool with it either. Like when you see one, you couldn't be like, dude, is that an alien? Holy crap. Like introduce me to that alien. You know, like you couldn't be like too excited. You would have to like really play it cool.
Yeah.
You'd be like, oh wow, how interesting.
Right.
Well,
you know, like,
and it could be, you know, it could be because if it starts off with them, if you're one of the, you know, people who's abducted at the hands of these covert guys, and you are freaked out by it, that's probably also, you know, wow, man, this person's got mad skills. We'd like to use them, but they're too freaked out by it. You know?
Yeah.
And maybe I was one of those. I mean, who knows? Because some people, it just goes so far and kind of stops. You know, so
different people have different reactions to new things, right? I mean, I'm no scientist, but I mean, I feel like it's got to be
Dr. Scientist.
I'm a doctor scientist.
That's right.
Yeah.
But you know, like there's a difference between nature and nurture when it becomes like you're introduced to something totally new. Like I'm a very curious person, I think, by nature, and if I see something that totally like bewilders me, I'm like a child in a candy shop.
Gotta look at it.
I'm
me
like,
too.
oh my gosh, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, me too.
If I could go, so I mean,
But at the same time, you know, with these guys, hey, I admit I've freaked out pretty good, you know, a couple times.
Right.
So they're probably like, oh, well, you know, she can handle it to a point, but, you know,
right.
she's not cool as a cucumber.
And then I feel like there's these people that just totally glaze over that stuff and they just think that, oh, well, that's not happening and that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think there are also those people that
block it out mentally.
They just block it out, you know? And I think it does go down to a genetic level. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's, you know, maybe you don't have the strong enough genetic signature. Maybe you don't have the strong enough psi abilities. I mean, I have psi abilities, but maybe they're not of the kind that these guys are interested in, you know. And so, and I've met people that, like I always tell people, I've had a lot of stuff happen. I think I've had 9 military abductions at least. And I don't remember like the ones that Gail and her daughter, you know, knew about. I'm like, I don't even count those. You know, if I count those, then there's more, you know. So I'm like, wow, you know, so, but I've met, I have people that have only had 1 military abduction, never had more. And 2 and 3 and 4 and everything. And then I know people that have had it a lot more than me. And a guy I know, just a quick example. Alien. Now this is an advanced case, but it's a really good way to understand because a perfect example, things we've been talking about. Alien abductee realizes it happened to his parents, you know, obviously runs in his family, lifelong experiences. In his never joins the military, but in his abduction starts, and this is common for abductees, and this has happened to me too, to be used in kind of military-like events. And some people get like military training scenarios and stuff. And he starts having that happen and progresses, but it's all in the guise of an abduction. And next thing you know, he finds himself being trained on these things. And next thing you know, he's part of a team perpetrating these experiences in the context of he's been abducted to do it, but he's remained very conscious. So
he's being abducted.
At some point, they're able to stop doing as much mind control and stuff on him, and he's able to remain conscious. And he never joined the military. But next thing, and then he gets extreme guilt over it, and going, "I'm terrorizing people where I was so many years ago, and now I'm terrorizing others, and I don't want to be a part of this." So he actually, in his case, besides saying no, and being so difficult that he wasn't worth their attention, his parents knew someone very high, well, actually a congressman. And his parents were friends with a congressman, and he went to this person and said, "I'm being used for something I don't want to be a part of," or something like that.
Man.
And this congressman pulled some strings and passed some stuff along. Now,
wait, so the congressman was like, "Okay, yeah, hey, bro, I know."
Well, the congressman didn't know if he was legit enough, but was good enough friends with the family to say, "Let me see what I can do," and maybe just started to ask questions, and that they're like, asking too many questions.
Oh, so maybe
and this guy then became a security risk because the congressman was asking questions.
Yeah. The congressman necessarily didn't know anything about it. He was just kind of like, "I believe you."
Yeah. I asked him, "Do you think the guy knew anything?" And he said, "I don't think so, but I think he started to ask questions, and that was a problem."
Wow.
Yeah. But he said, and he had extreme guilt, and he doesn't want to be public. He doesn't want to do anything that causes interest by these individuals, because occasionally they followed up and checked up on him, and whatever, like they're keeping tabs on him. And he says, "I don't want to do anything that increases their involvement in my life or with my family." Or anything.
Absolutely.
I don't want to put anybody at risk, and I don't want to encourage anything. So he doesn't want to go public. He won't even talk to me anymore. He told me this initially, and now he says that enough, but that's it. We're done. I don't talk to you anymore.
Well, you know somebody, and then you don't.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping to go forward with kind of helping him and being an investigation, and he came off just so incredibly credible. I'm like, "You've got to share this story." And at one time, I think he was almost considering it, and then he pulled out.
It's got to be tough.
You guys, this
isn't
really like, tough. Everyone rushes out to talk about this. First off, with alien abductions, most people don't want to talk about it. Don't want people to know. There's a lot of people who go public for a while and pull out of the field. The UFO field can eat its own. Sometimes it could be really rough on people.
Yeah.
Some people, they just say, "Hey, I want to lay low," anyone who goes public in the field for any amount of time, I applaud. And any of those who've bothered to stay public. But there's a lot of famous abductees that you can go and look up their books and find their books and then go, "Gee, what happened to them?"
Right.
And that's the majority of them. There's very few that remain in the field, because the field is not nice to the abductees, unfortunately.
Yeah. I feel like it's 10 times, maybe 100 times more difficult for somebody who has an experience and wants to talk about it than it is for just the average, like me and Joe. I recently, I was working at an agency, and I let everybody know about the podcast even, and they were like really supportive at first, and then, man, like a couple weeks later, people started being like, "All right, well,
kind of weird to you."
Yeah, like really weird. And well, I don't work there anymore, so it's fine, everything's good. But even from that, my point is going from that, and then I guess connecting to somebody who is actually, I've never had an abduction experience. I've seen a few things, a few lights, and I told sightings, and I've told people at my company, and every time after that, everybody kind of treated me a little differently. So I can't imagine how people that have had experience, like further experiences, could feel.
And the place where they should have support within the UFO field, they get some support, but not completely. They do in the abduction support groups usually, but even those can be rough because there's
skepticism.
People are people, and groups are groups, and
tribes.
Basic.
We're all
stuff
monkeys.
Happens,
We're all just monkeys. You know what I mean?
That's right.
Sometimes.
Yeah. And no, you're right. I get exactly what you're saying. And and then you add to it this aspect, the covert involvement stuff. And those people really, even if you're an abductee and you're already public, it's really hard to include this. Now, some have, and that's why we kind of know about it. It's been included in books and people's experiences, and the late Dr. Carla Turner and her work, and Helmut Lammer, and then various a list of about 20 famous abductees that have talked about this part of their experience.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And so, but even some of those have been guarded, like, they maybe started to share a bunch and it wasn't that well received. So they kind of pulled back on it. And like I said, a lot of people drop out of the community.
Right. It's a shame.
And also when you first start learning this is happening to you and you start going public with it, at first, the perpetrators of this, the covert human guys, come down on you pretty hard and can make things kind of rough and make things rough for you and your family. And, there's stories where they've created financial difficulty. There's stories, of course, there's threats and warnings. And a lot of abductees pull out because this aspect of it gets difficult. Yeah. And they pull out from being public because they want this part to stop.
Well, you've experienced things along the same lines as, many people know that are into this, the Stan Romanek, as we've talked about, you and I in our last conversation. Physical repercussions of these instances. It's terrifying.
And people who know his case well, now I know it's very controversial in the UFO field. He was arrested for child pornography, which he didn't do. He had some in his possession, which those close to him believe was planted on his computer.
Yeah, can we kind of elaborate just real quick if people don't know? Like, this is kind of a shock. Like, would you mind elaborate? Because I know a little bit about it. But he was brought up on 2 charges of child pornography, but he was found not guilty on one, which, and then the other one was just a very minor possession one, which he was found guilty on, and he did the time and served, and that was that. And he never had to go to jail. It was just, not free to travel or move about and couldn't use a computer and various things. And eventually he did what was required of that and finished it, but he was written off by ufology because that made him a huge credibility issue, understandably, for people to have that reaction.
Yeah, people just didn't want to be involved.
But people
with
close to him knew that that was probably planted.
Yeah. So that's what I'm interested in.
A lot of people who look at pornography stuff online maybe come across, because everything's linked, internet, and you can come across stuff, and there can be history on your computer of coming across stuff, but also, if there's downloaded images that can be planted or whatever, and his computer had gone out for repair, come back with stuff, and this kind of thing, and what a lot of people don't know, and I tried to talk to him about it. I knew him, but not well. He didn't really want to talk to me about this, but he did talk to other people that I know.
Yeah.
But it was known that he was having the Milabs stuff happen. That he did mention some of that and some incidences that were clearly along that lines. And he had a lot of minder activity happening, befriended by insiders quite a bit. And so this all happened. And at some point he started to have like recruited further along those lines, having some super soldier kind of stuff happen.
Wow. I didn't realize that.
And and I don't think he wanted to do any of it. I think it was all in an abduction scenario and reluctant and that he was difficult. And he was getting a lot of advanced mathematical formula stuff that the Pentagon had showed interest in, considerable interest in. And, those things, those writings on his wall, he would wake up in the morning and his bedroom walls would just be covered with formulas and stuff.
Right.
And he wouldn't remember doing it.
Wow.
But sometimes he would have kind of a cursory understanding of what some of it was. And those formulas were making their way to the Pentagon and there started to be interest in them. And I think he pushed back from all that kind of interest. And I think that's when they put him out of commission. Like, either I don't know if he'd ever be willing to talk to me about this for me to confirm. So a lot of this, what I know is the Pentagon had interest in his formulas. That I know, and I got that from some really good connection to the Pentagon kind of people.
Right.
They had an interest, and I do know he had heavy minder stuff going on, and I do know he had some advanced Milabs stuff and stuff that started to be like super soldier stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And and I think whether he was just difficult and they put him out of commission, or whether he didn't want to participate, whatever, that's the part I'd have to ask him that I don't know.
Yeah.
But apparently, that's when stuff happened. And he had a neighbor he didn't get along with. I think they knew that, and they used the neighbor to create problems for him.
Oh, man.
Because neighbor.
It's always the neighbors,
was the person who turned him in on this, And but it was someone he was not getting along with. And
neighbors turned him in.
And so they by putting him by just destroying his life and his reputation,
right?
And him, having legal issues, and that made everyone in ufology write him off. Now, then people said, after that happened, oh look, well, we knew he faked this and this anyways. Well, no, that's not true, And
again, it's like people are sometimes
they were just looking for an excuse to write him off.
Now there was one or two incidences where he was egged on by television crews to do something that was a mistake.
Right.
That
he made the mistake.
And anyone out there, if you're listening, if you've had experiences, and especially if you're having this stuff happen, if you're having Milabs stuff happen at all, and you do any radio or TV or anything, and anyone gets you to hoax, fake something, do something at their request, whatever, you are setting yourself up to,
for failure.
You're setting yourself up for failure. And don't ever risk your integrity over this stuff, because
I think that's really important. I'm glad you just said that.
Did he make some bad decisions? Absolutely. Did he make some bad decisions? And those bad decisions combined with the legal issues, well, he's out of the field. And he wants nothing to do with it, because ufology turned on him.
Yeah.
People who were his friends that he had really trusted really turned on him.
Man.
And that's a shame. Now, not everyone did. There are people that, didn't. But and eventually the stress over all this caused problems in his relationship, and he ended up getting a divorce.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it did. I mean,
Lisa, but
it kind of blows my mind sometimes, because, while it seems like it's easier said than done, like if somebody asks you to maybe, overblow the truth or kind of make some stuff up or whatever. It's strange to me because the truth is already so mind-blowing that
TV camera crews can say, "Oh, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this?" And maybe they even have good intentions. Like, I'm not saying that they're an intelligence friend or something, but you do it, and then word gets out that you did it. Forget about it.
Yeah.
History.
Yeah.
And this people, I don't know. And that's, like I said, the UFO community can be difficult in themselves. They can be two-faced about stuff. I mean, I've always said I stand by Stan as a legitimate case. He had extensive evidence. I know someone with that Pentagon connection who said they absolutely had an interest in his stuff. And, but he also was naive. He let himself get very involved with some individuals who were probably going to be a problem, and without the knowledge of how cautious he needed to be with them. He was naive.
Right.
And so I think his naivete, a variety of things, some bad decisions here and there combined with it
sounds like a mix of
they found a way to put him out of commission, and they did.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I were to think, I mean, I don't really know where I stand on it. I definitely stand where, man, he's just got a bunch of evidence, and I want to believe the guy. I don't know where I stand on the believability scale.
The majority of the evidence is probably legit.
Yeah, so I mean,
some of it might have been questionable and bad decisions regarding that.
Yeah. But way he talks about it,
I know people I'm very good friends with.
Yeah.
Were there at his home, witnessed additional things, even some of the stuff that people say, "Oh, come on, that was phony." I know people who were there and witnessed it and said, "Oh no, I was a part of that. There was nothing phony about that."
Right.
Yeah. So there was other eyewitness accounts
another person who's being naive and needs to be careful because he's going down the same path rather rapidly.
Who's that?
And Chris Bledsoe needs to be very careful.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think I know about him yet.
Well, he's an abductee that is resurfacing. Richard Dolan just did 2 interviews of him.
Okay.
He was kind of prominent in the field, stepped back for a while, and he's resurfaced again. There's a whole long story behind that, but they're very good reasons. And needs to be careful because he's I like the guy a lot, but he's just naive enough that he could be taken advantage of and have a problem. And that's kind of why he pulled out before. A little of that happened. It's kind of a long story, but a little of that happened, and now he's back. But he needs to be cautious because he's just a little bit naive, and he's a really good case, and I just don't want him to have any of the stuff happen that happened to Stan.
I could tell you're coming from a good place, Melinda. Like, I just applaud that. And also, like, there is something to be said about people that have had these experiences. They're sensitive people. Like, sensitive people are also a higher risk of subjectivity to suggestion. Like you said about the media. Like, hey, we just need this one shot of you saying, "Oh, look, there's something in the sky," and then you're like, you know what? Well, we only have like 10 minutes. Okay, well, I guess I can do it because you're here and you drove all the way out here. It's that kind of mentality. So I mean, you got to be careful. And I think what you're saying, Melinda, is just like it's maybe like naive sometimes sound
a little. The insider type, the minders, the insider types that crawl the woodworks and become interested in you. You got to be cautious. I mean, hey, I'm friends with some of them. I have it too, but I'm cautious. Yeah, I'm very cautious. And
well, I think that's
Stan was, and he was naive about it, and trusted some people maybe he shouldn't have trusted.
Right. Yeah.
And
you got to be careful. I mean, and you're dealing with some really important shit.
These guys have been real good to Chris, but it's at some point if you don't play along, well, so far Chris has gone yeah to everything they wanted. So 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 he's okay. But you know, you got to be careful. That's all.
It's the Fayetteville incident, right?
Fayetteville.
I just pulled it up and I was just looking at some stuff.
To
see if I could recognize. I do recognize his face. Yeah, because I recognize the name.
Anyone, if you go, well, who's that? What's that about? Like I said, Richard Dolan on his YouTube channel did just did a third, just posted the third one. So 3 recent interviews. And it's an amazing story. It's an amazing story. And there's more, and Rich will probably follow up and do more with them. But and he's speaking. You guys will meet him. He's speaking at Lorianne's conference.
Oh, sweet! That's where I've seen his face. Right. Then okay, and I know his name.
Yeah, he's speaking for Lorianne.
Okay,
this will be the first time that he's spoken at a conference in. He's only done he's only done one other once, and it was many years ago. I mean, 10, 15 or more years ago, you know. Yeah. So it's the first time since then that he'll be speaking somewhere.
Awesome.
And Lorianne's known him for a long time and all along has tried to get him to do it. And as soon as she heard he was willing to do stuff, she said, you promised me I'd be the first if you ever went out again. And he says, that's true, I did. So she has
well, that's awesome. I'm excited to hear that.
UFO con.
Now everyone's going to ask him to speak. He'll hit the conference circuit now. You know, more than likely he's going to hit it, but she's the first one.
That's perfect. Well, I have a question for you.
You got to come. You know, if you're listening to this, you got to come to this conference.
Oh yeah.
First off, this conference, what's going to make it different than others? It's not a run-of-the-mill UFO conference. It's very much all about people who've had direct personal experience and contact.
Yes.
And
that's what I've been looking for. I'm so excited.
I mean, there's a few minor deviations just because there was some researcher with really good new stuff or on just, whatever it was that she has them there. But that's just a few of the speakers. Everyone else has had direct personal experience and they're all really mind-blowing cases of personal experience.
Yeah.
So you're gonna get more personal experience stories of what people actually went through, the effect it's had on their life. That's really the emphasis of this conference this time.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. When Lorianne was telling us about it, it definitely piqued my interest because I listen to her show too, and some of the people that have been on her show are going to be at this conference, like Eric Mitchell and stuff like that. And man, I can't wait to hear these stories. I mean, they're going to be pretty awesome.
This is like her top list of the most awesome stories, with the possible exception of just a few people who are doing amazing research that that she's having them. And so everyone go look at the the website for it again, UFOCON 2020, so 2020.com UFOCon2020.com, and look, go to the drop down for the speaker list, go through all the speakers and et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be really phenomenal. I'm always honored to be a part of her events. First off, her events are always really fun. They're not huge. It'll have, 300 or 400 total people in attendance.
Yeah. She said this year might be her last year. Did you hear that?
Well, she always.
Yes.
She always says that. She's doing it. She's like a moth drawn to the flame.
Oh, that's so crazy.
That's glutton for punishment. But, yeah.
Oh, man.
No, she loves doing it. She loves providing the forum and the information and giving people with incredible stories. Like, she has speakers no one else will have because we don't know who they are. Like all the other conferences, you have to be famous to be. It's like, well, why keep having the same people you can hear over and over and over again? And granted, some of those people have great new research and great stories, and so I go to those conferences too. But she's willing to take the risk, and then the producers of these other conferences come to her conference, and then to hear these people, and then ask them to speak at their conference. There's 5 people that she's had that over the years now have spoken at Contact in the Desert because she had them first.
That's awesome.
Well, hopefully our listeners, the UFO Garage podcast, they're all over the world. We got a pretty awesome crew.
Yeah.
I hope that a bunch of our listeners come out. If we get like 20 people from our listeners to come out.
Because some of our top listeners are from California.
Yeah, exactly.
So it'd be awesome for them to come out. So if you guys from California are listening, you got to come out to this thing, man. Come say what's up.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be awesome.
And it's an inexpensive conference. It's the hotel's inexpensive. I mean, this is one of the really cheap ones to be able to do. Much lower price.
It really is, yeah. I mean, compared to UFO Congress, I mean, it's definitely like.
But compared to Congress or Contact in the Desert and the price of the hotel and the price of the conference, it's all a lot less here. It's very, very doable.
Yeah.
And
we're going to buy our ticket to the hotel before we air this so that we could get the good price.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Do that.
Man. Well,
I'm spoiled. I'm a speaker, so I get it. There's some perks with being speaker. I always say when I do conferences, I attend a lot of UFO conferences, but I always say it's good to be speaker.
Hell yeah.
and hey, they're not money making. I'm lucky when I speak if I get expenses covered. That's it.
Yeah. Oh, you get to stay on the top floor, huh?
Oh, the top floor.
The top floor.
No, you don't float for that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
No, I'm just lucky if I'm getting any expenses covered for any conference I speak at. I mean, there's only a handful of people out there that get big bucks like Giorgio Tsoukalos or something,
Right.
Otherwise, no.
Well, he's got really good hair. So,
I love that guy so much.
Yeah.
I love Giorgio. Hey, well,
actually, Giorgio is actually a friend of mine, and you guys, I'm not just saying this. He's a really nice guy. He's really cool. He's just laughing all the way to the bank. He's just enjoying it.
He seems like a pretty awesome dude.
Yeah.
He's really a good guy. I've known him for years. I used to have a lecture series in Southern California where I had speakers every month for almost about 10 years. And he spoke for me like twice back then. And I joke with him, you came and spoke for me when we're lucky to have 50 people in the audience. Now you put his name on the schedule and you get 5,000 people.
Oh, yeah. Everybody shows up.
Yeah.
Everybody shows up for that.
Yeah. And I tell him, I said, I tell people on my tour, I'll tell you guys this. I knew him before hair.
He does a little.
That was purely a thing for the show. It's they over-gilled it one time and people wrote in and he just got egged on and he just ran with it. Ran with it. But when I knew him that, he had thick hair and if it grew out and back, it would kind of flip up when it hit the collar, and it was thick and kind of curly, but that's it. It didn't do all the crazy stuff. So I tell people I knew him before hair. in
the movie Stargate, he's on the special features. Yes. Like if you go through the special features in the movie Stargate, he's in there and he doesn't have the crazy hair. So I kind of feel like I knew him before the hair.
You totally did. You know what I'm saying? You showed me that. That's so awesome.
It's so hilarious, man. But so I had a question, kind of before we get into this, like some of the new research that you've been doing.
Well, you asked a segue question, and I know we never got there. Sorry.
Oh no, it's all right. It's all right. One of our listeners wanted to know is a gray the only ET you've encountered?
Oh no. I've seen at least 8 different types of beings. Now, first, when you say gray, that's like a category. So
right. Yeah.
I've seen 5 variations on grays.
Ooh.
So 5 different types that you'd all consider grays, but they're different types.
Right.
And then I've seen hybrids between gray and human.
Uh-huh.
And then I've seen reptilians once for sure, maybe twice.
Ooh.
I've seen insectoid, what are called mantis beings, 3 times.
Okay.
Twice for sure, maybe 3. I think 3 times. I've seen Nordics about 3 times.
Wow.
And Nordics means anything human looking.
Right.
Well,
Nordics, mantids, reptilians, grays, and hybrids.
I'm sitting here like floored. I didn't know.
But the grays have been a variety of types. So it's I used to say 8. Maybe it's more than that. If I've seen about 5 variations on grays and then hybrids, that would make 6.
Do whites fit in that category of grays?
So maybe 9 types.
Wow.
I'm like stuck to my chair right now because I didn't know Joe was going to ask that question. So
I just heard. What was I listening to? Somebody was talking about oh, maybe it was it Chris? Maybe it was Chris Bledsoe in his last interview talking about cloaked beings that are cloaked and it made me go, oh my God, I had one, maybe two, but I one for sure, experience that back when I was working with Deborah Troncali and she had regressed me, there was a particular experience of cloaked beings in my room.
Where they were like kind of like a monk's uniform, right?
Yeah. And Chris talked about that, and I had forgotten. I had totally forgotten. Yeah. And it made me go, God, how many other types over all the, over 30 years of investigating and conscious memories and regressions. I'm like, oh my God, what am I forgetting? But that was another one. And I'm like, oh my God, I've seen I mean, he's talking about it and I'm going, oh my God, I totally had that happen. And I'd forgotten about it. It was even one that Deborah had regressed me over and everything. I had some conscious memory and she'd regressed me. And it was just a highly weird something else, but I absolutely had that happen. So if I go, if I stay cloaked, because I don't know what was under the cloak, they weren't grays, they were taller. Yeah. And I didn't, maybe they're Nordics, but I couldn't tell that. So I'm like, do I count that that would make 10. So I should count it, I guess.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. I know Ryan Sprague, he's going to be coming on the show, and I want to ask him, but he has a lady that he's been talking to who has had an encounter with this cloaked being, and apparently there's been a lot of kind of paranormal activity associated with it. Like there's ghosts.
It's actually really all the types I've seen are all really common in abductions.
Right.
And the cloaked beings are very common. It used to be in the early abduction literature. It was talked about a lot. So more than 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it was talked about a lot by abductees. And somewhere along the way, it kind of fell to the side. And until I just heard Chris in his third interview with Richard, and I went, oh my God, that's, I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot,
Wow.
And it used to be talked about, but see, when stuff isn't as talked about, or like I haven't experienced this, just one obscure experience, that gets lost amongst the things where I've had more of, or witnesses, or for whatever reason, there's, the 10 experiences I talk about the most and the others don't get talked about or even forgotten,
Because I've heard that sometimes, I've heard stories of abductees saying that, when they're abducted, they see more than one type in the same spot. Like sometimes they will see
it's very common on the ship to see 2 or 3 different types interacting. That's very common.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, when I have seen Nordics and insectoids and hybrids, there's always been grays also present.
Who was it, Joe?
And sometimes more than one type of gray. So it can be the short, stocky guys, the tall elder grays. There can be 2, 3, 4 different types of grays in the same environment.
Right.
Besides seeing, your reptilian or your Nordic or your insectoid also present, and then hybrids and, so grays and hybrids and any of the other types working together. It's all very common.
So Melinda, have you heard of the show called People of Earth?
Oh, yes.
So who told it? Was it Lorian?
Lorian, yeah.
She told us that's the most accurate TV show that she's ever seen. And
it's just funny.
It's so funny. It's such a good show.
Well, the writer sat in on support groups on the East Coast, on a very famous support group on the East Coast, put on by an abductee, and that's where they were getting their material. So it's straight out of abductee support groups,
genius.
And it really nails it. And it's just funny. I mean, people go, aren't abductees insulted by that? I'm like, no. I mean, I've never met an abductee insulted by it. They all thought it was funny. It's like our ability to laugh at ourselves. It's just
yeah, that's crazy.
For people that don't know, there are these 3 aliens on board a ship, a gray. And then somebody said, I missed, apparently there was one where there were more on there, but most ones I saw, there was the one gray and a Nordic or tall blonde, kind of like the description of tall blonde.
Yeah.
And then a reptilian.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
the reptilian and the tall blonde are always arguing, and everything about it. I mean, it's just funny, like one guy's screen memory is he hits a deer.
Yes.
Okay, and they've used this in multiple of the episodes, but the ship has a retractable fake deer that on a pole that goes out, and the retractable deer keeps breaking. With the retractable deer, that's the screen memory, So the person thinks they hit a deer when really it's the ship.
But can't you just see that? Like, I don't know, it's just so on the head. Like, can't you just see that being real? Like, what if? Yeah, like that would be so funny.
And then the Nordic guy is having sex with everybody. So,
right.
And everyone says he was this tall, beautiful, handsome guy, and he's skinny, and he's not, but the tall, beautiful, handsome guy. He told me he loved me, and and then the gray comes off like a little Jewish guy or something. And he's the one that leans in their face at the end of the experience and says, "You are special."
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
As soon as the first time I saw that, I just cracked up because I'm like, okay, I'm never believing the ETs again. It's just funny. It's just funny because it's like this. And then in the support group, what the arguments they get into. I mean, I ran support groups. I've sat in them. I've ran them at conferences. I had an ongoing one for years that I ran. I go to others. I mean, just over 30 years, it's been a lot.
Yeah.
And
so you're familiar with
the support group in this TV show say is just all spot on. It's so funny, and the arguments they get into, and it's.
I'm so glad you're you're able to just be like, that's freaking hilarious. Like if you're all like kind of, I don't know, like
offended,
that would be like kind of weird. I'm so glad.
I don't know. Yeah, I haven't met any abductee was offended by it.
Yes.
Some people said, well, it's serious. They shouldn't be making fun of it. And but I said, what, you didn't laugh when you watched it? And even those people go, okay, yeah, I laughed.
Yeah.
Even though they get mad about, no, they shouldn't be making fun of it.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You guys, humor's always good. Laughter's the best medicine. It's very healing. It helps you come to terms with it. There are parts of this that are just absurd, Yeah.
And it's a roller coaster.
And that's, to me, if you're able to laugh about it, it's, to me anyways, it means I'm still sane.
Oh, absolutely.
Still some sanity.
I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, absolutely. Like there is so much to this. I mean, again, it feels like a closing statement. It's not, because I have so many more questions, but again, it's like, man, there's so much to this where you could go, it's like a roller coaster. It's really deep and really serious. And then it's like, okay, well, let's take a breather for a second.
Step back for a second. Yeah. And
I know we're running out of time because have we gone 2 hours?
I mean, yeah, we don't, like I said, we don't really have a time limit.
Okay. I'm going to need to get going only because I live in Sedona where all the restaurants close at 9, and I have an empty refrigerator. And so if I don't hit the restaurants, and it's 8:30 my time now, so now that just means I just need to get someplace before then, and I'll be okay. But so if I can give you guys only about 10, 15 minutes more, that'd be really good.
Oh, that'd be perfect. Yes.
That'd be perfect.
You gotta go get that Lunchable,
Yeah, I'm out of stuff here, so it's either eat or it's really pathetic that they close, and that's like my only chance.
Sleepy Town.
Well, there's one. Actually, I take that back. There's one place I can go that's open later, and that would be okay. So I'm not stressed about it.
Awesome.
Right. Because I know you guys wanted to ask me, and you did ask me earlier, and I again was giving some pretext and never got to the end of the question, which was I forget what you were asking me about the working group stuff. You started with one question.
Yes.
Yeah, so I just kind of was curious, like, if you had any other, maybe explain some of the experience on the back and forth, the transcript that was in the UFO Denmark transcripts. We took screenshots of that back and forth between you and a certain individual. Well, there was multiple individuals.
Yeah.
Talking about the closed loop of information.
Well, closed loop of information was actually said to me by Ed Dames, quite frankly.
Okay. All right.
And I don't mind sharing that.
Okay. Awesome.
Because I don't care what he thinks. Quite frankly. Yeah.
All right, Dave. Ed, wait.
Yeah.
Ed Dames.
Ed. Oh, got it.
Ed Dames.
Oh,
Yeah.
got it.
Okay. Hang on.
So you're bringing it up. So yeah.
Yeah. Hang on. I'm just trying to go to. Well, I don't have to go to. I can go from memory.
Yeah.
And that was the kickoff to my starting to investigate stuff. Now, again, I had involvement with some of these guys, and for a while, but it didn't. I don't know. There wasn't an association of any group or anything like that. Okay. I knew certain members. I could throw out names, but unless your viewers really have been following stuff, they're not necessarily going to know them. But one of them was a guy I had been friends with for a number of years. And anyway, I can say that. I'll say that. That was the late Jack Houck. And Jack, this working group started with it pre-existed a meeting in 1985 that they had, and it pre-existed that, but my understanding it was maybe a formal kickoff point of coming up with kind of a game plan and moving forward and what they were trying to do, etc. And that was held in a file vault room at BDM Corporation in Virginia in 1985. And the meeting was put together by Colonel John Alexander and had a large group at it. Different lists have come forward that ranged between 15 and 30 people, let's say. And then there's some information, and I've even been told recently by someone who knows someone who was there who says, oh, no, it was more people than that. So I don't know how big that original meeting was, but, I think it's safe to say it was probably over 20 or 30 people. And I don't know if that means 40, 50, 60, 70, but, more than that. So, okay.
Yeah.
And, but they pre-existed and were talking to each other. This was just like a formal kickoff of let's do a joined effort kind of thing. There's a meeting agenda and minutes and notes from those meetings that I was able to come into possession of. And separately from me, completely on his own, Grant Cameron came into possession of some of the same. So I have some stuff that's different. I have more stuff than he does, but some of the things that he does have, also I have, and I just had a few more things.
Right.
Back it's okay. I had become friends with Jack Houck, who was someone in that meeting. I knew nothing about this meeting or this existence of this group or Jack's connection to anything.
We actually pulled up the question. I just knew Jack as
a guy who taught psychokinesis, spoon bending, and remote viewing stuff. And I knew over the years of knowing Jack, had learned that he was involved with the original remote viewing research that was going on at Stanford Research Institute when it first started, before there became a military unit and all those things. And so I knew that history, and I first met Jack through his teaching his psychokinesis classes, which he had done one at someone's house and I got to go to, and as well as early on a remote viewing session he had done at someone's house, a class that I got to go to. And then he taught the psychokinesis repeatedly at a metaphysical center I was very involved with in Southern California, and then remote viewing at a different metaphysical center I was very involved with. So there you go. Taking Jack's classes and stuff, I knew him, and at the time, and this was, I have it in that presentation. The years are escaping me right now, but
yeah. Joe's actually got it
mid 90s. What? I think it was like 94, if I remember. It's something like that, 94, 96, something. But Ed Dames was giving a lecture for MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, in Los Angeles, and about remote viewing, and also maybe tying it into in the unit when they would remote view UFO related stuff or whatever, But occasionally MUFON gets into other subjects, and Ed was famous for his connection to that, understandably. So they're having him talk. Well, at the time, I was taking a remote viewing class with Jack Houck. Like I said, I'd known him for many, many years. This was, early 90s, and I had known him since at least 85, maybe 82, a long, long time.
Right.
And so I'm taking, Jack's class, but I go see Ed's presentation, and the next night I was going to have one. Jack's class was a weekly thing for 5 or 6 weeks or whatever it was. Okay. So I was going to be at his class the next week, or the next night, actually. But so I hear Ed's presentation. At some point, there's a get up at the mic and ask questions kind of thing, and I did. And he was kind of poo-pooing other people who taught it, and it's Ed, go figure. Just the way he was,
Oh, Ed.
And you go, okay. And so I get up at the mic and I say, well, what about, you're saying disparaging things about other speakers. What do you think about Jack Houck, other teachers of remote viewing? What do you think about Jack Houck? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, Jack just does what they originally did at SRI. And, and his statement wasn't completely wrong. But, he cut him some slack because I was putting him on the spot. And he was, and he's obviously, I knew Jack or had taken from him or, whatever. So Ed was watching his response. And that was that. I felt he answered me to my satisfaction. And the presentation was basically the history of the remote viewing stuff, very basic stuff, And so I stuck around afterwards talking to people in there. There were some vendors in the back of the room, that kind of thing. And then people were putting stuff away, and a bunch of people left to go to Denny's restaurant. And they said, we always did after everyone. They said, we're going to Denny's as soon as we're going to be over there. Come when you can,
That Grand Slam.
Yeah. Get that Grand Slam. You got it. you better believe it. The French Slam at that. Okay. So you better believe it. Okay. So, which means French toast and pancakes. For those that don't know what
I'm glad you clarified.
The French toast slam, But, okay. So I go to leave, and I thought Ed was long gone. He was there with his girlfriend and, whatever. And I thought they were long gone. And I go where MUFON had their talk was this place called the Pickwick Center, had this big garden area. And then there was a vine-covered fence with a narrow entrance to the parking lot. And so you had to kind of file through that if you were with a group of people. Well, right where the entrance to the parking lot was Ed talking to a bunch of people. And so I hesitated just to say, excuse me, waiting for a lull in the conversation to say, excuse me, so I could walk through this group and go to my car because I had friends waiting with ordering French Slam for me. So, I couldn't miss out. So I said, I was about to say, excuse me. And Ed goes, he goes, you're the one that asked the question about Jack Houck. I go, yes, that's right. He goes, do you know Jack? I go, that's right. He goes, have you taken viewing from him? I go, yes, I have. And he goes, oh, really? And so this starts kind of a conversation. And this conversation kind of progresses, and everybody else starts to kind of fade away because we're having a private conversation at this point.
So that's where that transcript comes from, is that conversation?
Well, at least just this part, yeah.
Okay,
because he goes, oh, so you do remote viewing? He goes, he starts with, well, this was the beginning of how I learned about the group.
Oh.
Because he says, oh, you know Jack? And I go, yeah. And he goes, how well do you know him? I go, pretty well. And he goes, do you talk to him often? And I go, not really. And he goes, oh, well, you'll talk to him again? And I go, yeah. And he says, well, will you tell him something for me? I go, okay. Meanwhile, my antenna's going up, red flags are waving all over. It's like, danger, Will Robinson, danger, and I'm like, oh shit, this is freaking Ed Dames. Letting me pass something on to Jack. I'm like, where is this going? And he had this weird attitude like, oh, Jack? Oh, well, would you be willing to tell him something? I'm like, what the hell? I'm like, okay, I'm game. I'm up for a game. I'll play. Okay. So, and he goes, And everyone else is, because we're clearly having like a private conversation, so they're slowly peeling off. And he goes, will you tell him about something for me? And I go, yeah. And he goes, he says, well, I forget exactly how he worded it in the beginning, but he goes, I was in this group with him, and he starts to say, I was in this group. He names about 10 or 12 people. All are like, holy cow. You know?
Name drop.
I knew most of the names, 6, 7 of the names I for sure knew of. And he mentions these names, and I go, okay. And he said, yeah, we're all part of this group. And he goes on, and next thing I know, it's like he's telling me him and these guys are part of MJ-12. I mean, he didn't say MJ-12, but I mean, the way he was talking about it, it was like, yeah, we study UFOs. We know everything about it. We work for the government, blah, 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 goes on and on. I'm just going, what?
Wow.
And he mentions, like I said, 10 or 12 people involved as far as what he mentioned is what I remember, and he goes on. And he says, will you do me a favor? And I go, okay. He goes, ask Jack about it. He goes, would you be willing to do that? And I'm like, yeah. But I'm thinking, he's probably not supposed to be telling me this. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, and I didn't like say why. I just was listening, and he's going on and on. He says, yeah, we did this and this. We were interested in this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it was like this total UFO think tank on behalf of the government. And I mean, it was just,
I know there's like so much more to
and
this.
High level individuals and
that you're not going into, but
and
I know
I thought, why is he telling me this?
Yeah.
But okay, so that goes on, and then it shifts, and he goes, so you stay remote viewing, you come to MUFON. What's your interest in this? Do you research the subject? I go, yeah. And he goes, oh, what area of research? And I thought before I said it, because based upon everything he just said, I'm like, what the hell? He just gave me a bunch of stuff, and I don't want to play games with him, because what he just told me was so high level that I just kind of went for it. I just said, I researched Milabs. He goes, what's that? I go, military involvement abductions. He goes, well, what do you mean? And he goes, and it goes on. But then after a while, I start to figure out he's just playing stupid.
So you're saying the right, you're saying the right things.
And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, and this goes on, and he goes, really? He goes, what makes you think that? And I go, well, I've had experiences with it. He goes, well, what makes you think I have experience? Well, I remember. And, well, you don't have any proof of that. I go, well, yeah, I do. He goes, no, you don't. And I go, yeah, I do. I've got all sorts of evidence. And, like I said, after a while, I started to go, oh, shit.
Right?
It was clear. And his tone is getting more and more serious, and it's being less flippant, and it turns. And then he starts getting very threatening.
Oh, no.
Now, Ed's really short. He's like 4 feet tall. No, he's like
so you're saying
5'2" at best, maybe 4'8". I don't know. He's really short.
Short man syndrome.
And he's got this mop of red hair. At the time, it was kind of like a short page boy in red, and and he starts pointing his finger at me and taking steps towards me, like deliberately. Invading too much personal space, causing me to kind of slowly walk backwards. Yeah. Everyone else is gone. It's just his girlfriend sitting in a car on the other side of the parking lot. So on one side is her parking lot, on the other side's my car, and every other car's gone. Like everyone's gone and left by this time. And he's doing this. And he says, that never happened to you. I go, yeah, it did. He goes, no, it didn't. He goes, that never happened to you. And he starts threatening me.
He's kind of worried about his paycheck at that point.
No, I'm like, this guy knows a lot more. Okay. And he goes, stop talking about that. He goes, because he said, do you ever lecture about it? When at first when he was playing dumb, and I go, yeah, no, really, you do. Do you write about it? Or yeah, a little bit, whatever, And after a while, I go, I just could tell it was turning, and I started to get like more reluctant in my answers and simpler and one-word answers of yes and no.
Yeah.
And he was getting more authoritative and more. And anyways, then he starts with a threatening tone. And then he says, okay, stop researching that. Stop talking about it. Drop it if you know it's good for you. And he's being very directly threatening. And then he says, and then he goes and he's walking towards me. And at this point, he's hitting me on the chest with his finger, like he's pointing at me, but he's, and I'm stepping back, and he would step forward and I would step back so he wouldn't hit me. But occasionally, I think he tapped me occasionally. Wow. But he's, very deliberate and very like, don't, like, damn. Stop talking about, stop researching, and then he goes, you will drop it and leave it alone, or something will happen to you. And then he does this, and then he points at himself and he says, and I will see to it personally.
Oh my God. Wow.
So he goes, something will happen to you and I will see to it personally.
Them's fighting words.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't like that.
And at this point, we've gotten over closer to his car. His girlfriend has the window down. And she goes, what are you guys talking about?
The comedic relief in the background.
People are being abducted by the military. And she goes, oh, well, that doesn't happen, or whatever,
Oh, wow.
And then, or whatever, whatever. At that point, I'm just freaked out. I'm just like, Dave's just threatened my life.
Wow, that's insane.
Or threatened me. Just said something will happen to you, and I'll see to it personally. After he had just told me that him and Jack Houck and all these other guys I know are members of MJ12. I'm just, my head's exploding.
That's insane.
And I'm like, and he gets in his car. They drive away. I walk. I think my knees were going out from under me. I get into my car. I'm like, and I drive to Denny's, and I walk in. And do you guys know Dennis Whipple?
No.
Okay, well, Dennis he'll be at Lorian's conference running the filming of it and everything. And so he does a lot of that. And and I've known Dennis for years, since back then and before. And then I'm going to MUFON LA and MUFON Orange County. And then he would always do the AV, the filming of it and the recording of it for both. And anyway,
so he's like an AV guy.
Yeah, and follows the subject, and before that has a long background in following conspiracy stuff, and used to listen to KPFK all the time, and all, so he's really knowledgeable about all alternative stuff, big time.
Yeah,
and always been very active in the alternative fields and socially active and that kind of thing. Anyways, so I go in and Dennis goes, where have you been? I go, Talking Dead. He goes, you were Talking Dead? He goes, like, after everybody left? I go, yeah. He goes, what the hell happened? And I'm just like, he goes, something's wrong. He says, I can tell. You look like you're completely in shock.
Oh, you haven't even touched your French slam.
And like I'm telling someone that, and he's like, oh my God. Okay, so then the next night, I go to Jack's class. And it's this remote viewing class, and I stay, and a lot of times I'd stay till the end and help him pick up. I always had stacks of papers and, whatever. And binders, whatever, lots of training materials and whatever.
Yeah.
And I go to the class, and I brought up because I'm like, I was sitting there like sweating bullets going, do I ask him this? Do I ask him this? And I started to ask him, and I said, I went to Ed's lecture last night for MUFON. He goes, oh. He goes, what do you talk about? I said, remote viewing. Oh. Yeah, da-da-da-da. Oh. I said, I asked about you. Oh, and he's just acting like a cool cucumber, And I said, Ed, tell me, I talked to him afterwards in the parking lot, and he told me some stuff, and he asked me to tell you about something. He asked me to ask you about something. And he goes, oh, what's that? And I start to tell him, and Jack had his back to me at a table with like a stack of binders and papers in his hands. And he's standing there, and he just freezes, and I'm starting to go on. And he takes the stack and slams it down on the table. And I'd known him for years, very mild mannered, laid back guy. And all of a sudden he's huffing and puffing. And he turns around and he goes, why would he tell anybody that? And then comes over and is in my face and goes, let alone you. You know?
Oh no. Oh, no.
And I'm thinking, oh God, Ed's a dead man. You know, that's it. They're going to kill him.
Yeah.
You know, and
they do.
And then he goes, what else did he say? You know, and I go on, and he's just fuming and just looking at me and just shaking his head. And now I'm thinking, okay, am I in danger? You know,
right? Yeah, as you should.
But I felt close enough with him and friends for so many years that I'm like, well, he'd protect me or tell me, you know, I'm about to be read the riot act. I'm about to sign an NDA, you know, something.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, and I'm
like the complete
what?
opposite.
And he goes, okay. And eventually he goes, okay. All right. He goes, yeah, that's all true. You know, and he basically confirmed what Ed said. And he goes into all this stuff and he goes, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm part of this group, blah, blah, blah. This is what we do. This is blah, blah, you know, whatever. And he starts telling me some stuff about it. But I think he's trying to kind of diffuse it. Like the best situation here is build up a level of trust with Melinda. You know, if you ask her not to tell anyone, she won't. And you know what I mean? I think it's just, and also kind of admit it and downplay it, downplay its significance, right. Even though the way he just reacted gave it away, you know, right. But, you know, kind of downplay it. And he goes, he was also good friends with my friend Steve. And he goes, that subject that you and Steve have so much vested interest in, meaning UFOs. He goes, yeah, I know everything about it. In fact, I've known about it for many years, and I'm more involved than you could possibly imagine anyone to be involved, you know, kind of thing. And
yeah, and
I'm very deeply involved and, you know all about it. And so do the people that Ed mentioned and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And he was very forthcoming with me, I think, because of our friendship and because, again, it was like he probably thought just diffusing it was probably the best thing to do, you know.
Right.
And we talked for a while about it, and he admitted to a bunch of stuff. I asked him some of the things that Ed said to me. I said to him, and he just looked at me like. Of course I'm not going to answer that, you know. So there were a few things he didn't answer or say.
Right.
But the things that he did were pretty telling. And then, but then get this, we at the end, I'm helping him carry, because I said, I appreciate your time. He ended up staying like an hour to talk to me, you know. And I said, I appreciate all your time. I appreciate your being straightforward. You didn't need to tell me any of this, and you've been very straightforward, and I really appreciate. And of course, I won't talk about this, and you know, because I felt like I was let in on something, and he was admitting it, you know.
Right. Well,
denial wasn't going to work, whatever, you know. And so, and then he goes, "Whoops, hang on, I got to plug my phone in. Ugh. I had it plugged in, but the plug out."
Everybody's got to plug their phone in.
My battery's going to be dead if I don't. So let me see. I gotta make sure I'm
hey, you got to get charging. You got to get your dinner too. Are we
okay? So
we good on time?
There's no. I won't make the ones that close, but there's one restaurant open later, so I go to it.
Nice. Hell yeah.
Yeah, it's a decent restaurant I can go to.
I hope it's a Denny's. That would be awesome.
No, it's not Denny's. There's no Denny's here.
Dang it.
There's a Denny's about a half hour away that if I push came to shove, I would drive because it's a half hour away.
Yeah.
But one that's literally 5 minutes from my house is pretty good, and they're open till 10.
Nice.
So I have to be off before 10. That's an absolute.
I feel like I will only eat at the Coffee Pot anytime I'm in Sedona. Yeah. That's like the best food ever.
Oh yeah, the Coffee Pots. We have a lot of good restaurants. Luckily, we only have a few that I would say steer clear, but we have a lot of really good and some award-winning food, and you know, so it's really good stuff. Yeah, I eat good. I'm not a big
good in the neighborhood.
I'm not a big cook. You know, I mean, there's a few things I do, but I eat out a lot. What can I say? I'm single, you know, and don't like to cook a lot and buy a bunch of stuff for it. So even if I'm eating home a bunch during the day at various times, I tend to eat dinner out,
Well, when me and Joe come and visit you in Sedona, we're going to have to cook you an awesome meal because we're both pretty... I mean, I'm a pretty good cook.
Pretty decent cook.
Pretty good cook. I'll cook you a badass
cool.
steak you'll never
I'll
forget.
take you guys up on that, man.
I'll cook you an awesome steak you'll never forget.
Maybe throw a
Texas
brisket
steak.
Come out here and one
Maybe do a
night
brisket.
We'll go out. We have this really good, award-winning Mexican food that's not like tacos, tostadas, burritos. It's gourmet, award-winning, called elote. It's very good.
Ooh.
And so one night we can go out to elote, and then the other night you can cook me a good meal.
Sounds
Hell
good.
yeah.
Sounds good. Jocelyn said she'd let us stay in her guest house.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Jocelyn's. That'd be a
boy.
great
Yeah,
place to stay.
we should do a barbecue at Jocelyn's. Have the crew over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That'd be sick.
absolutely.
Well,
We just had a great Thanksgiving there. We had a fantastic Thanksgiving. Anyway, now that
awesome.
we're boring your audience is going, really?
Oh no! I mean,
at all.
But no. We had a great Thanksgiving.
That's so
and
cool.
A bunch of fun people and amazing food. Anyways, it's the way Thanksgiving should be. So
I love that. Good
okay,
people.
so that's and then I'm carrying stuff out to the car, putting boxes in the car for him. And at one point, he's just about to get in his car, and his car door's open. So he's standing on one side of his car door with like one foot in the car, like he's about to get in. And I'm on the other side. And I even had said in the room before we walked out, I said, look, I appreciate your time because of what I've been through. Because he said, how did that conversation come up with Ed? And I told him about the whole conversation. And so and I said, look, because of everything I've been through and my experiences, that's why I feel I have a need to know. I get to ask these deeper questions because I've been through a lot.
Yeah, as you should.
Okay. And then he did this. And he didn't respond to that. He was just listening to me. He wasn't saying anything. Again, it was like no comment. Like he would just give me looks, And the looks he gave me made me go, we've never ever talked about not even my alien abduction stuff. But I'm like going, he knows. And based upon everything he just told me, he'd be in a position to know. I'm like, he knows. So I'm standing on one side of his car door, he's on the other. And then he goes, maybe even closed the door and walked towards, maybe he closed it for a moment, but he's standing right in front of me. And he goes, those experiences that happened to you? I go, yeah. He goes, let me see if I can remember how he worded it. He goes, that stuff, that stuff that happened to you? I go, yeah. And he goes, points to his own chest. He goes, I was never a part of any of that stuff.
Why would he even say that? Like,
well, the looks he was already giving me and stuff told me he knew. And so when he goes, I was never a part of any of that stuff. I think he was telling me the truth. He wasn't, but he knew it.
Right.
He knew I had it.
Right.
And he knew it happened. He just was saying, he pointed himself, like, in other words, we just talked about a list of 10 or 12 people,
Yeah.
that Ed had given me, and Lord knows Jack didn't give me any other names. They were the names I brought up, but he never offered up one other than to confirm that those names were right. But he said, I was never a part of any of that stuff. In other words, maybe some other people in the group were, but he goes, I was never a part of any of the stuff that happened to you.
Wow.
And he said it like he was angry, not at me. Like things he said was clearly showing me he was angry at Ed. It was never anger at me. And when he goes, I was never a part of any of that stuff, was like he was angry about it, but he was letting me know he knew it happened.
Right. Wow.
And anyway, but that started with, okay, so then like a week later, I'm at MUFON Orange County, and I'll go ahead and say this because one of the names on the list who was part of that meeting was Bob Wood, and he's sitting right in front of me in the talk, and I lean over during the break and I say something to him, and I'm sitting right behind him, and I just lean forward. I said, Bob, I had an interesting conversation with Jack last night. Oh, you did? You saw Jack? I said, yeah, I'm in his remote viewing class. I said, night before that, I went to Ed's class. Oh, really? You did? And again, playing stupid. I brought it up, and he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never been a part of that group or whatever. And he denied it like 5 times before, okay, and then we're ready for the break to end and the speaker to go on. And he goes, I'll talk to you later.
Oh.
Okay. And afterwards, he says, come with me. We go out in the parking lot, and he confirms everything. And he says it and looks at me like point blank, like, and what are you going to do about it? Like, no one's going to believe you,
Dang.
Yeah.
And
does that ever make you nervous when somebody's like, come with me?
Just like, oh my God. And he told me even more. He told me a bunch more, and because I'd been friends with him for many years, but his attitude was like, I'm telling you, no one's going to believe you. There's nothing you can do about it. It's just, like, again, it was like once I knew enough, because I sat behind him and I said stuff that Ed had said and that Jack had said. And then outside he goes, tell me more about what they said. So I was relaying everything they said.
Wow,
and then he added a bunch more. But I'll tell you, I ended up initially talking to, so Jack, by the way, Jack denied it at first when I first brought it up. He denied it like 3 or 4 times before, after he'd thrown stuff down. He threw the stuff down, and then he goes, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, we just got angry and threw stuff down. So obviously you do, And he tried to deny it a bunch of times, but gave up and then eventually went into it. Well, Bob denied it a bunch sitting behind him. He goes, really? He said that? Wow, that's really bizarre. I know nothing about that. Are you sure Jack told you that? He was like, but I could tell from his voice was quaking, as he, and I knew Jack and Ed had both said so much to me that I knew, okay, I'm like, Bob, yep, this is what they said to me, and that's afterwards he goes, come with me,
Come with
we go out in the
me.
parking lot. And he's like, well, actually out on a sidewalk, but, outside the building, quite a ways away.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, and he goes, now what else did they say? And tell me more, and I tell him a bunch. And then, like I said, he goes into a bunch more and explains kind of the structure and everything, And then I knew someone who was working on a research project with Hal Puthoff and said something to them. And then I met someone that worked with, I knew someone that worked on a research project with Hal and said it. And then I met someone else that knew someone that worked at EarthTech, Hal's company with him in Austin, Texas. And they
that's
said
where we
something.
live.
And I forget who else, but long story short, I ended up having 3 unrelated individuals approach Hal about it. And they were all unrelated to each other. And by the time the third one did, he's like, who the hell told you this? And, meanwhile, I'm sure these guys were all calling each other going, oh God, anyway, so, and that started, and all 3 individuals got back to me and said, oh man, you really pushed a button with Hal. And these were people that worked with him. So he opened up and told them some stuff, because these were people who worked with him or worked in projects with him or were already, with security clearances. And he said, look, can't tell you everything, but I'll tell you this much. And, again, like, diffuse it, like, just, it's no big deal, la, 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 like, diffuse it, and yet told them stuff, but they all came back and said, Hal confirmed everything you said.
Wow. That's crazy.
Hal confirmed everything you said. And then years later, and then there were other times where I had never ever met Hal Puthoff, but there were other people I knew that knew him and this and that, and I'd never met him. And I go to an IRVA conference one year that was in Texas, and I come out of a lecture room into a big hallway, and I'm going to go across the hallway into a little hallway that goes into the foyer of this hotel. And I come out of the lecture room and I pause for just a second, and there's this long, great big giant long hallway. And all of a sudden from the other end of the hallway, I hear this voice go, hey, Melinda, or hi, Melinda. And I turn And standing at the end of the hallway is Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, and Ingo Swann.
What?
And they're all waving at me like long lost freaking friends. And it was Hal. It was Hal who goes, "Hey, Melinda, how you doing?" He goes, "Hi, Melinda." He goes, "Hey, Melinda," like that. And when I turn and look, he goes, "Hi, Melinda, how you doing?" They're way down there. And from that distance, the three of them knew exactly who I was. I'm just like going, I walk away with my knees buckling, going, "Oh, I do that."
Oh my gosh!
Hal's all, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like,
"Oh
okay,
yeah, we're
he
friends."
knows who I am, And I've met him again since then, but that was just bizarre because I'm like, from the end of a hallway, I'm walking across the hallway, and he yells out so loud it stops me, and he knows who I am from that distance. I'm like going, really? Now, it was just like, but that, like I said, this started a whole investigation and, got into the aviary stuff.
Yep.
And that whole history and the TV show that was done at the time and, all this stuff that was about, the history of the aviary stuff and MJ-12 documents and more, Moore and Chandray, Bill Moore and Jamie Chandray and that history and of course Rick Doty and Robert Collins and that history and what am I trying to say? The Benowitz story and that,
right.
And then it moved forward into interim years and then what was called the Carpenter Affair and then funding researcher John Carpenter and then the abductees getting so mad that their files had been sold, and it turned out they were working at the time with Bigelow. This was even before NIDS, and Bigelow had bought those files, and that the Bigelow started to fund MUFON, and all this stuff. Just it was just one thing after another, and then the formation of NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science, and everything they had going on, and then after NIDS, BASS, and then BASS creating OSAP and ATIP and, et cetera, and then to the stars. And so, it just was one continual thing that every time there was a new development. But what Randy and I were doing was plotting out the timeline for this. And then we had abductees who were constantly being involved with these folks. And so every time anything came up with what we heard the guys were doing or any projects or who they were funding or whatever, we were plotting it, and we were plotting on this timeline every time an abductee interfaced with them, which was a lot. And then as each thing happened. And so suddenly with the disclosure information in the last 2 years, it just became, I said, Randy, we gotta speak up more about this stuff. We've got an important piece of the puzzle, which is a history, to this whole thing. And
absolutely.
And then I heard Grant talk about this was probably about 5 years ago, talking about it, and then he was posting a bunch of stuff on his presidential UFO website, a bunch of documents and stuff. And then he had the agenda and another page from the original meeting. And I told Randy, I said, "Oh my God, I got my page because Jack Houck, upon his death, his wife had my friend Steve and said, 'Steve, would you be interested in any of these files of Jack's?' Steve said, 'Oh yeah, well, come on over. You can go through some boxes. I'm going to shred them, whatever you don't want, I'm going to shred, so take whatever you want.' Steve went through a bunch of boxes, narrowed it down to like 3 file boxes and took them home. And, narrowed them down to anything that he thought was of significance. And he knew this story already. So, about the group and the original meeting and blah, blah, blah. So, as soon as he saw those things in the files, he's like, "Oh my, bingo," and so he, grab things that he thought looked significant. And he and I had both done a lot of remote viewing classes and stuff with Jack, and we're starting to actually teach it and whatnot. So he was looking for any of the old teaching materials from the class, and so he was interested in the remote viewing stuff. Not the remote viewing, the psychokinesis stuff, the spoon bending psychokinesis. So looking for anything on that and the remote viewing stuff, and Jack's background, and whatever was of interest. But he saw these things, and he said, "Melinda, I think I found some document to back up all that stuff that you talked to Ed and Jack and everybody about." And sure enough, there were these documents, and that's how I got them. That's how I got them. And here Grant got them from a totally different source of someone he met that was originally at that meeting.
Yeah.
And so his were the same documents, but his had gone through some kind of classification process because they were stamped with like a classification, and mine weren't. Mine were just went home with Jack and in his file,
Oh.
But what I also had was more stuff. So I had what Grant had plus more. And so when I saw that stuff, I said, "Randy, I twisted Randy's arm to say, look, we've got what Grant's come across, and we've got more, and we should share our stuff, since, hey, more power to Grant Cameron for coming across so much stuff on his own." So I meet up with Grant at a conference and say, "We got to talk," kind of thing. And that led to, so now I share stuff with Grant Cameron as well. But because one thing just led to another. And again, this was a number of years ago before all this started to break. But when all this stuff started to break, Grant and I are on the phone, and and with other people too, going, oh shit, here we go again. Here's more, And when I say this stuff, I mean front page of the New York Times, and the existence of ATIP, which we didn't know, but it was just like, okay, they're surfacing again, we have another, here's another possible incarnation. It looks like it's some of the same people.
It's like the new era,
et cetera, et cetera. So it just led to, connecting the dots back. And then there's an overlap you saw in my presentation. And if people watch it, they'll see I've got this one brief slide that shows years of involvement, and the years all overlap from group to group. I mean, and it's sometimes hard to tell, but when did a group really end and another one begin? And they morphed into each other.
Right. Well, so that's kind of, I'd love to end the podcast there, because this is such like a huge story. It's so much background and so much research that you've done, Melinda. Like, we're going to post on our website the link to the UFO Denmark presentation that you've done.
Yeah, to both of them, my Milab one and my
absolutely
40-year history of the working group. Because I mean, people are going to go, what are they talking about? You know? And
well, some of it.
I spell it out in those presentations. That's why they're so long, but I really spell it out.
Oh, well, I mean, man, again, the time couldn't be, I mean, I wish we could go all night. I wish we could. We could.
But I admit I'm starving.
Hey, well, Melinda, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Oh my gosh, it's been too long since we've seen you, and we can't wait to see you at UFO Con.
Did we cover anything? No last hanging question or something that you guys got to have an quick answer to?
You know what we need to do is we need to just have you back on the podcast.
Okay. Well, anytime. I enjoyed it.
Oh,
okay. Yeah. Thanks for letting me just rip. I mean, a lot. As you can tell, these stories are involved. I can just go blah blah blah.
Absolutely. No. It's. Oh my gosh. That's what the podcast is about. It's a free flow, laid back kind of platform. There's no structure to it. Whatever comes up, whatever we talk about is what we talk about. Like that's. I've had so much fun, like speaking with you.
Well, and I appreciate when I'm given the opportunity to put the information out there, lead people to watch those presentations, because then they'll get the facts and the evidence, and a greater understanding, and also chatting with guys like you guys who are knowledgeable. You're really knowledgeable. You follow these subjects. You want to know, and it's a pleasure to talk to you about it.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Man, I can't tell you how stoked I am.
I know. I'm a little bit speechless. Like my mind is kind of like I'm going to have to mop it up off the floor after this. There's just so much to this. But we are absolutely going to have you back on the podcast because there's so much more to cover.
There's so many questions I still have.
And to talk about. Absolutely. I mean, and you know, maybe after the conference we can get you back on. I know we're gonna have Lorian on to kind of promote the conference before we head out.
Sure.
Maybe we can even squeeze you in before the conference too, just to finish off just some more stories and to promote you, since you're going to be a speaker there. We may actually have to do that too.
Yeah.
So
well, you know, and too, here we just talked about things other than I did cover alien stuff in the beginning, but you know, what I'm doing at the conference is good old fashioned alien abduction. You know, it's my experiences with that, and it's not this stuff. But Lorian's like, look, we've done that for these guys. These guys want to say, well, what's her backstory? You know, they want to hear that. So, and I, you know, almost begrudgingly agreed. But then, like I said, well, you know, it's about encouraging others to do the same. So I'm like, hey, if my doing so encourages others, and you know, so that's kind of the drive behind doing it. And but just know, if people come to the conference, they'll hear my alien stuff, but not the other. But the other, again, there's nothing I would say there that I haven't said, because those two presentations for UFO Denmark, which were basically like doing my lecture on Skype, you know, and so those are up to date on both. So that's for those areas of research. You'll get all of it by listening to both of those.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melinda.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me on and let me do some shameless self-promotion.
Hell yeah.
I really appreciate it.
I feel like we've been hanging out in the same room all night. It's been so fun. It feels like UFO Congress all over again. I can't wait to hang out with you and buy you a beer when we're in San Francisco as well.
That's a deal. That's a deal. I'll take you up on that.
All right. Awesome. All right. Well, guys. Hey, go get some food.
Yeah, and by the way, everyone, these guys are really fun at a conference. They're just so much fun to sit and talk to. And, you know, how do they get these researchers to do this? It's because they're just fun guys. I think everyone you guys talk to is like, I'll do your show, you know, because they're super fun.
We felt super lucky. Like, you know, it was almost like it was natural to us. And it was like our first conference. And we ended up making so many friends.
God, that was your first one?
That was our first one ever. Yeah.
Oh, my God. They're all different, you know. They all have a different vibe. And you're going to love Lorian's. It's really a blast. And they have this one restaurant there. Was it like Bennigan's or whatever in the hotel? And that's where your breakfast, lunch, and dinner are there. But everyone just sits up all night and talks. You know.
Well, we will be there every single night.
Yes,
you can count on that.
Well, thank you so much for the nice words.
Again. Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And it was really fun.
All right, Melinda. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Well, holy baloney, jabroni.
Holy shit.
My brain's like scrambled eggs.
Yeah.
Like soggy cereal.
Mine too, man.
That was a lot, dude.
I'm so stoked to have her back on. That's what I'm like focused on. I want to have her back on to finish a lot of those stories.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's so much more. I mean, we talked about it a bunch in the podcast, but like, man, every story requires like 10 other stories. And
it does.
And then those 10 other stories require like 5 other stories per story.
Yeah, because you guys have to understand that any one subject that they touch or she touches, there's a backstory to it. To even be able to explain what she's talking about, there's so much like history behind what she's talking about that I mean, it's just it's a lot. It really is a lot. But man, I hope you guys enjoyed that as
definitely.
much as I did, because I mean that was awesome.
Absolutely.
I mean,
next time we have her on, you know what we should do is ask her about one specific what you did. I love that question. You were like, have you seen these races of aliens?
Right.
And I want, like, let's start with one. What was your experience with a mantis being, right? Or what was your experience with a reptilian?
Yeah.
And then just have her kind of, you know, tell us what her experience was. That would be awesome.
Yeah, dude.
Even
absolutely.
Even if it's like a 30-minute thing. I don't know. Well, I think it'd be awesome.
I mean, yeah, she's gonna be one of those like guests that comes on multiple times.
Multiple. Like molting, like insectoids. Molting. Multiple.
Yeah, dude.
Man, that was so much fun.
That was a lot of fun.
I
mean, how it's not every day that you get to sit and talk to somebody who's like, yes, I've been abducted by aliens.
Right.
I've been part of the hybrid program.
Yep.
I've also been abducted by military people.
And I've also had 30 years of research and evidence and documents to back all of this stuff up.
Yeah. Right?
Like what? Like what are we doing talking to this person? Like what? I don't know.
It's pretty incredible, and it's
humbling.
And it kind of makes you think like it's so easy to sit back, like just for the average person to be like, I mean, yeah, I think aliens could be real. I mean, the universe is so big.
It's like so big.
It's kind of silly to think we're the only thing out there, right? And nothing against those people, right? But it's completely different when you have somebody like Melinda come on and say, yes,
yeah,
absolutely. I have documents. I have pictures. I know people who work at the Pentagon. I have inside information. Mm-hmm. Like it's a whole new ball game.
It really is. And the nonchalant nature of the conversation is, I mean, I said it earlier, but like that only adds to the validity of the story and the evidence. It's like, she just talks about these things like, oh yeah, well that's reality for her and a lot of other people.
The amount of names and stuff that is also included, and then for all these people not to be like, oh well, she's full of shit, right?
Well, that's another. I'm sorry, I just get excited.
No, go for it.
But like, that's another thing. It's not just Melinda Leslie. It's hundreds, maybe even thousands of people that have had the same experience as her.
Right.
And there's also other people that were a part of these programs that are high caliber official people in the military or government that, you may never even know of.
Exactly.
That's what's super interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, dude, mind blown.
Mind blown, dude. Dang, that's what we get on the UFO Garage podcast, dude.
All right.
Yeah, bro.
Dude.
You guys, okay, we're going to end this soon because it's been a really long time, but check out our website, UFO Garage PC. We got merch. We got hoodies for the cold weather. We got t-shirts. We got socks. We've got banana hammocks. We've got nipple cups. We've got nipple tassels. We've got finger gloves.
Dick pillows.
Yeah. We've got contact lenses with Joe's faces on them.
Yeah. Oh, hey, dude. That's pretty sweet.
That's fucking sick.
That's pretty sweet. Also, we still want to send Max to NASA.
Yeah. Send Max to NASA. We haven't got any donations, and I'm so disappointed.
I'm disappointed.
I know. I just saw him today, and I asked him about it again. I was like, "Hey, man, how you doing? How you holding up?" He's like, "Hey, nothing, bro. Like, it's so good. It's
Yeah."
And he told me the story over again, and there was another person that walked in behind me and like was mortified. She hadn't heard the story before. Anyway, let's send Max to NASA, you guys. If you don't know about it, my buddy that works at the gas station down the street or the convenience store down the street, hardworking guy. He's not even 21 yet. He's a kid. All he wants to do is go to NASA. He wants to be a scientist. Let's send him to NASA, okay? We don't have to send him to college, but, a ticket to NASA isn't that bad.
I think it's like $55.
55, dude?
55, yeah.
Who's he been talking to then? Loch Ness Monster did?
I don't know.
Oh, wait, that's $350. My bad.
That's $350.
That's way more. All right.
Yeah.
Bad joke. All right. Fucking Jesus. Anyway, that was a fun podcast, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Alrighty, man. Well,
this has been another episode of
UFO Garage Podcast.
We'll see y'all next time.
Talk to you later.
Peace.